Good afternoon, Milwaukee. This is the Mark Belling Late Afternoon Show on News Talk 1130 WISN. So Apple's now worth $2 trillion, right? It's hard to even kind of understand what that means. That's the problem that people have with numbers. You heard them say the 2 years ago, it was only 2 years ago that Apple was worth $1 trillion. Now it's worth $2 trillion. Obviously, anything doubling in value, that's an incredible move. But for most people, $1 trillion sounds exactly like $2 trillion. They can't. People have a hard time differentiating between the two. There's a serious point to be made about this. This is one of the reasons why I think people often make terrible decisions with regard to public policy on some of these school referendums. They can't wrap their heads around what the dollar amount is that they're involved in borrowing for some of these projects. And I think that school officials have learned over the years that it sometimes doesn't matter how much money you seek in a referendum increase. The people who are going to vote yes are going to vote yes without regard to what the number was. And the people that are going to vote no are probably going to vote no without regard to what that number is. So why not just ask for an insane amount of money, because some of the people who are going to vote yes are just going to be dumb enough that they'll say yes to literally any number that you put on. I think you saw that with that obscene referendum that we had in Wauwatosa a couple of years ago. They came up with a number that was, we laughed about it in terms of compared to just the population of the city of Wauwatosa, not even addressing the fact that there are significant declining enrollment problems in Wauwatosa, and with the educational quality of the Wauwatosa schools really falling in comparison to neighboring communities. For a lot of reasons, there's reasons to believe that people are going to be transferring out. The school choice thing remains real. Declining enrollment is continuing forever because of the declining birth rate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Without even standing that, just comparing it to the actual population of the community, and even if it was an outstanding school system, the number was just an unbelievable amount of debt that was being taken on for every man, woman, and child in the community for that referendum. And the point that I made, and one of the things that I think we learned at the time, is you couldn't win the argument by talking to people about the dollar amount. Because in Wauwatosa, if it was 140 million or 90 million or 30 million, people who were in favor of it would have just said, it's for the schools and we need the money. It didn't matter what it was that you said. Now, I am in the business of rejiggering a lot of things that are going on with my life. This is one of these stages in which you have to decide how much money you're going to put aside. And what do they call it? What do they call the money that, it's not the nest egg. The safety net? No, that's not it either. What? No. It's just like if the markets go up or down, whatever that money is, that's probably not going to move much one way or another. And, you're supposed to do this the older you get, back off on the amount of risk that you're taking, because we're in an extremely volatile time right now. Some things I think are clearly going to go way up, and some things are going to go way, 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 way down. So I'm moving all of these things around and doing this, that, and the other thing. And I mentioned that the decluttering process that's going on, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that means getting rid of some stuff and buying new stuff. And I know what can happen when somebody says, okay, you need 9 things. It's like when you go to a car repair shop and they have 9 things that are on the list. By the time you get to the 5th or the 6th, your eyes glaze over and you tend to just say, yes, go ahead and buy it. Go ahead and do all of it, right? Rather than one by one going through each thing. If you went in once a week for 9 weeks and they had one thing each week, you'd give it a little bit more scrutiny. But when there's 9 things on there all at once, it sort of glazes through. But still, most of us, I hesitate to ask how much your televisions are worth. Every time I ask Paul how much some of the stuff that he has is worth, it blows me away, because it mostly tells me that I've mismanaged my life. That Paul says TVs, I know, but every time I've ever asked you how much you paid for something, haven't you said a number that shocked me by how high it was? Every single time this has ever come up. Your outdoor kitchen, your riding lawnmower. The only thing that didn't shock me was when you told me how much you paid for your car. But everything else that you said blew me away. Mostly because everything that you have is worth more than the comparable thing that I have, and whatever that is. So now, you did once tell me how many TVs you had, which just boggled my mind. You had like 3 per person, and this is when you had 4 people in there. Weren't you once at 12? You're at 10. That's 2. Wait, is your daughter in there now? Sort of. Yeah, she's in college. I know. It used to be when you're in college, are you in there now? The answer meant no. Then for most of the people of her generation, actually the older daughter's generation, it meant yes. And now I get your answer, sort of. Yeah, I get that kind of sort of. She floats. Is that what you're saying? She'll be going to well, really? You're under the impression that there will be in-person education at a university sometime in the next millennium? So there's 2 or 3, depending on like what hour it is. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Well, yeah. No, 2 or 3 people that live in your house. Are you counting her or not? Yes. Is she there more than half the time? No. See that but I mean, think about when we were kids. Even when we lived there, we were never there. I mean, when were you there? Like when you were in high school, when were you there? Like 10 o'clock at night till 6 in the morning, right? Yeah, she's in Illinois. Well, thank God they lifted the quarantine. There's so many people that were confused about it. It was only a Chicago quarantine. And the thing of it is, it's not like their police aren't even arresting rioters. It's not like if they saw somebody from Wisconsin, they were going to throw a net over them and lock them up for 14 days. But the one thing that I was told you couldn't do really was to check into the hotels. That was where you get into trouble on the quarantine. But they've taken Wisconsin off the crapo list. I just love that. Illinois has had 9 zillion more cases than us. The whole state of Illinois has been coming up to Lake Geneva and Door County and the Dells, infecting us with the coronavirus, and they quarantine us? Yeah, they are everywhere up there. I mean, I don't blame them. Would you want to be in Illinois right now? First of all, the problem that Illinois has and why we all know why they go to Door County, the Dells, and to Lake Geneva. Illinois, it's just a matter of geography. I mean, it goes back to whether you're a creationist or somebody who believes that we had a big bang or whatever. There were glaciers that flattened out a portion of North America, and they flattened Illinois, and they kind of moved right to the middle of Wisconsin, and that created hills, valleys, lakes, and all of the topography that we have. Whereas, I mean, I lived in central Illinois for 5 years. People think I live in southern Illinois. Look at a map. Springfield is in central Illinois. It is way south of Chicago. People just don't get how long Illinois is. I mean, I think southern Illinois is in South America. That's how far down it is. No, Mark Belling is wrong about that. Let's fact check it. It's not in. What are you doing? Looking at a map now to see it? You were, weren't you? Don't you? Oh, you were playing at the podcast. You can look at a phone. Our phones now have maps on them. I saw a guy wearing the Apple iWatch last night. It seems very dorky to me, but then I admit that it was both dorky, but, I have a regular traditional men's watch on that costs a lot of money. And his thing looked like a dorky thing, but his dorky thing did 97. You know what my watch can do? Tell time. That's it. The date. Give me a break. Do you actually think I changed the date? No, that doesn't. Well, maybe modern watches do. My watch is set on a 31-day date. So since not all are 31, it gets skewed off. For instance, when I'm in June, it gets screwed up because it doesn't know. My watch doesn't know what month it is. It doesn't know if it's AM or PM. This isn't a smart watch. Probably a $12 electronic watch would know that. But you spend $2,000 on a piece of jewelry and no, it doesn't know any of that. In fact, I'll look at the date now. That's the other thing. The date numbers on these, I bet on these like Apple watches, the date's really big, right? The date, okay, like you think mine's got the temperature on it? Hang on. It claims it's the 14th, my watch. Okay, that's because it's been, I take it in for a battery, I have a watch that isn't a battery, but this one has a battery. When I take it in for the battery, they always reset it, and the guy will wind it around and do all of that. So that means since I'm off by 5 days, that's 530 days. Then February really screws you up in there. So, so those watches seem dorky, but then I admit, I only think they're dorky because I don't have one. But don't you think they look dorky on people? You had one and got rid. Was it an Apple Watch or just it was? No, the guy tells me they do way more now than they used to. It's like the first It's like the first iPhone didn't do anywhere near what the current thing does. Paul says, yeah, except, I mean, he's waving his finger and it's got 25 different faces on it about how it looks. But, like how we change our screensavers on our phone. My watch is always going to look like this, the one that's on here. But I have more than one. That's another thing. Single guys have too many watches. Like you probably don't have any decent watch at all. So that's the one. I got a better car than you and I have more watches. Everything else there is, you have more of me and then you spend more on it, right? You have a $400. That's not a bad watch, but mine's more expensive than that. That's I'm just saying. Watch and car. And that's how it generally works with single men. That's where you marry guys out. Everything else, you have better stuff than us. You know why you have better stuff than us? You have wives who make you get better stuff. I'm just me. I don't need what do I need that for? The other one, I picked up on this. I pick up on this when I go visit friends who are married. Married couples have way better bath towels than single men. Do you know when my bath towel gets replaced? When there's so many holes in it that it literally doesn't. It's a perfectly good towel. So what if it's all ratty up there? What do I care if it looks ratty up? But you could never get away with that being married. Your wife would make you get rid of it, right? Plus, I know this. Bathroom towels are now a fashion statement. You go in there and you do notice the towels that are hanging and they color, what do you call it? Yeah, they coordinate it with the decor of the bathroom, right? My towels aren't coordinated with the color of the bathroom. It's just, I'll pull strings and all of that stuff off, but it's kind of the same thing about when single guy gets rid of his socks. When there's a hole in it, right? There's nowhere to get rid of socks before there's a hole in it, is there? Now, I got off of this thing, your TV, so you're up to 10. Is that what you were saying? 10 for 3 people in the house, and it's not even always 3. Why do you need way more TVs than there are people? For every room. So you've got them for every room. Now, so obviously, I'm guessing some of the TVs are older than others. They're all flat screens. The most expensive TV you have, what room is it in? Your great room. That's all another one of these real estate terms. Great room. What's the difference in a great room and a living room? There's vaulted ceilings in a great room. Good grief. We have allowed real estate agents to just change. There's so many groups that have just changed the language on us. I know that's a new thing. Don't say master bedroom anymore. The master bed, did it have it? I don't even know where it came from. Did it have anything to do with slavery or not? What did it come from? That's just like where the man of the house would sleep? Well, maybe it had to do with slavery, but okay, we can't say that now either, apparently. So what do we call the master bedroom? The biggest bedroom? Primary. I mean, who made them do this? Did the real estate people do this on their own, or did Black Lives Matter throw a rock through somebody's window and then we caved in on that? The real estate, but I know they're caving in, but is it like Marquette when they changed the Warriors' name where nobody even asked them to cave in? They just changed before they were even demanded that they change. So in other words, this one, nobody even objected to it. They just changed on their own. A preemptive move. They don't understand that those never work, do they? I admit, I always thought it was a stupid term, master bedroom. But now I want to use it just because apparently it's become a controversial term. You've never gotten an answer to this question, which has held up the entire course of the program. The best TV you have, it's because I keep getting bothered by your answers. The great room. Shut up with your great room. Say living room so I don't get upset. I don't have a great room. How do you have a great room? Are you going to tell me you have a living room and a great room? A living room and a great room. Which room is bigger? The great room. Is that what they call it, the great room? See, listen to how we talk. We do need a revolution in our country. Maybe the lefties are right. Maybe AOC is right about that. I have a great room. No, I have a great room. Yeah, okay. That's for how much does that TV cost? When it was new? $1,500. That actually isn't that much. So mine, when it was new, but see, you replace yours frequently though, don't you? See? Mine is 10 years old. Yeah, I know. So, I mean, I spend more, but then I hang on to it for a longer period of time. So, what I was saying was, an hour and a half ago, when you make a decision on what kind of a TV you're going to buy, you to go through that. I mean, I'm sure you could have bought one for $800, or you could have bought one for $4,000, and you ended up at $1,500 in between. And you figured what gave you enough of the 4K UHD smart features and all of that stuff, and looked good enough without going absolutely crazy, but still gave you all this stuff that you could be a proper suburbanite with with a TV. That's not how it works with referendums. That close parceling out, and you probably thought about a 2,300, and you also probably thought about a 900. No, you got these 9 other rooms, put this one here, put that one there, and put the other thing. That's not how it works with referendums. The way it works with referendums is when you explain the value of Apple to people, like you heard in our business report. Apple crossed $2 trillion in market capitalization today. It had only been $1 trillion. When these referendums come up, people just vote for it without giving any possible examination as to why they are spending as much money they are spending, or if it makes any sense to have that kind of money. And it's always borrowed money in referendums, to have that kind of borrowed money in communities premised on their size. And I've been making the point for the longest time, I really don't know our way out of it. And now that we are facing, probably, once everything clears with COVID, significant downsizing of government budgets, and probably a long-term decline in government revenues because of the number of businesses that are going to go under. I think half the retailers are going to go under. I think half the restaurants are going to go under. There's just going to be a permanent change and shift in the way our economies are set up, and we certainly see some of that happening anyway, and it's going to affect the ability of state governments to kick in money to these school districts. There's another component that's going to come in, and that is, I'm going to get to this shortly. I believe that one of the miscalculations that the public schools are making is it's not all going to happen right now, because it's real hard for parents to just decide, August 19th, I'm going to switch schools for my kid. I believe that there are going to be parents who look back on this and realize that they were betrayed by their local public schools, and when they needed them, they can't depend on them. And it will create an opportunity for competition from private schools, including some private schools that don't yet exist. People are going to realize that everything guys like Mark Belling said about what a bunch of gold brick, lazy-ass stiffs the majority of public school teachers are, turned out to be correct. We live in an economy in which millions of Americans have been deemed essential workers. Some are high-end, really, really important jobs, and others are the ultimate grunt job. You know, pull a bush out of somebody's yard and plant a new one. But they were all deemed to be essential, and not one, and we talked about this in yesterday's program, not one of those people complained about the fact that they were supposed to go to work during the coronavirus thing. It wasn't until this thing came up with the teachers that all of a sudden, once again, the crybabying occurred. And there's going to be a remembrance of this, that even months later, when the coronavirus numbers turned out to prove that children are not at risk, these schools still didn't reopen. And there's going to be, I'm not saying everybody's going to pull their kid out, but I predict next year at this time, many public school districts will have marginally lower enrollment because some parents will have said, I've had enough of this crap. I'm just not going to tolerate it. I mean, this situation, for example, what Germantown passed last night is impossible for anybody to explain. It's literally, it's alphabets and grade numbers. And are you an M? You know, are you between M and Z? And is your kid between the 5th and the 8th grade? And then it's different if you're in high school and if you're in the 3rd grade. It is impossible for even a skilled talk show host like me to explain. And as I just think, in addition to everything else, some of these parents are just going to be fed up and frustrated, especially that they now realize that in Germantown, they fire you if you criticize Black Lives Matter, but they don't even have the guts to open the schools when, like, 2 people in all of Washington County are in the hospital with the coronavirus. Now, that's an exaggeration. I don't know what it is, but I know it's low. 3 p.m. word. I can't get a feel for the NFL and who's going to be good. I can't even get a feel for the NBA playoffs, and they're going on. Now, I hear this. I hear people say that the Buffalo Bills could win the AFC. I hear this. Have you heard this? I just hear. I don't know if it's correct. I'm just saying I've heard it. I didn't say I agreed with it. I hear that they're going to finally win the AFC East. That people think that New England is not the same. That you can't just put Cam Newton in there for Brady and so on, and that Buffalo is the most talented team maybe in the whole AFC. I hear this from people. And my response is, I don't know. I can't keep track of who anybody's coach is right now. My head is spinning on all this. Plus, do we think they're going to play for the NFL? I bet it looks like better than 50-50, doesn't it? Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Will they play the number of games they say they're going to play? Don't even know. Bills, B-I-L-L-S, Bills. Text that into 200-200. You what? No, that's why I brought it up, Buffalo Bills. I brought up Buffalo Bills because I saw the word here. B-I-L-L-S, Bills. 200-200. You get a text confirming entry plus iHeartRadio info, standard data and message rate supply on this nationwide contest. So again, to be clear, the word is Bills, B-I-L-L-S, and you still have nearly more than half an hour, all the way to 4 o'clock, to text that in. All right, now I did this long little riff about money, dollars, people's inability to get a feel for this. This also comes up when you see these numbers that the Democrats have thrown around with their coronavirus relief packages. Now, Trump is very, very good. He's about the best Republican I've seen since Reagan, who is brilliant at it, in being able to bust through a number and expose what's going on. Trump came right out and said they're just trying to bail out their states that have run themselves into the ground. So they take the corona, Rahm Emanuel, never let a good crisis go to waste. They take the coronavirus thing and try to come up with a number that is so huge and then just send the money to New York, send the money to California, send the money to Illinois, send the money to all of the states that are bankrupted because of years of bad public policy, and use all of these trillions in funny money that we're inventing and throwing around to balance those budgets and claim that it has something to do with the coronavirus. Trump, I think, got that word out, and I think a fair number of people picked up on that. That is more effective than talking about simply the size of the number. But when you see the size of the number and you try to evaluate it and you realize that just in one stimulus package, they're spending like the same amount that the federal government spends in an entire year. It's not quite that, but you get the point. That this numbers of stimuluses, and this is just the latest round of it, they create these numbers that are insanely high. And the reason they create them insanely high is they don't want the Republican, I can't say they don't want the Republicans to sign on to it, because they'd love to see the Republicans actually bail out all of these bankrupt Democrat states. They know the Republicans aren't going to sign on to it, so then they could say, look, the Republicans don't care. They only care about their rich corporate fat cats, etc. So you always make a demand that you know is going to be too high. The difference that we have with regard to these school referendums is there is no demand that is too high. There doesn't appear to be any number that voters won't go and vote to approve. Let's move forward. 3 individuals have been arrested in connection with the incident that occurred a week and a half ago in Wauwatosa outside of the residence occupied by the girlfriend of Officer Joseph Mensah. One guy is accused of firing the shotgun, and 2 others have charges related to the incident. Story was first reported by a new website that's out there that Jessica McBride and a couple of other people, I guess, are involved in. Wisconsin Right Now, I think they call it. They had the story first, but it's out there. In fact, we reported last week that there were people in custody and that we thought that there were arrests. We now know that there are arrests and there are criminal charges. Anyway, there's a point to be made about this that doesn't have anything really to do with Black Lives Matter or the protests. It has to do with something else, but this is my best way of making it. One of the guys, the guy that's accused of firing the shotgun, they went onto his Facebook page and he's got photos of himself seemingly using drugs and carrying out about any number of things. And one of the things that he carries on about is the support of the Gangsta Disciples. The Gangsta Disciples is an offshoot of a street gang that many years ago was originally called the Black Gangsta Disciples. Now I don't know if there's 4 versions of them or whatever, but the Gangsta Disciples is a large American street gang. And I don't know if this guy is in it or not. People can say whatever they want to say on Facebook, but he comments positively on the Gangsta Disciples on his Facebook page. This is the guy that is accused of firing the shotgun. Now, here's the point that I want to make about this that doesn't have anything to do with Black Lives Matter. For those of you who live in Wauwatosa, understand that this man who's on Facebook, he lives in Milwaukee, by the way, not Tosa, carries on about how great the Gangsta Disciples are. He has more ability to sway public officials in Wauwatosa than somebody who owns a house and lives in that city for 50 years. They will give more attention to somebody from Milwaukee who supports street gangs than they will to a resident of their own community who's been paying taxes for decades. And we've seen this so far. The needle in Wauwatosa has been moved by so-called peaceful protesters, even though, as it turns out, they might be either gang supporters or gang members. That has moved the needle. The needle in Wauwatosa has not been moved at all by the residents of the community who are sickened at what has gone on there. It is agitators and protesters, largely from outside the community, one of whom was willing to fire a shotgun after people invaded the residence of a law enforcement officer from Milwaukee because her boyfriend was in the house, trashed and vandalized the exterior, threw bricks and rocks through it, fired a shotgun near the ear of one of the residents of the home. The crowd that has been doing that, largely non-Tosa residents, has been far more successful in lobbying Wauwatosa city government than the people who live there. That crowd demanded that Officer Mensah be fired. They're in the process of firing him. He's been suspended by the vote of the city council and the Fire and Police Commission. They haven't yet finalized the firing. They want to get the police chief fired. They might get that. The next thing, as you know, that I've claimed that they're going to do is they're going to try to get the cops out of Mayfair, that they're going to say they don't want police patrolling Mayfair ever, that it becomes an intimidatory thing. It's just going to be nonstop again and again and again and again and again and again. And the fact of the matter is, so far at least, what these protesters, and again, I don't know that they're all gang members. You know, I don't think David Bowen's in a gang. I don't think Jonathan Brostoff's in a gang. He's just a white guy from the east side of Milwaukee out there trying to act like a revolutionary, taking part in these riots that are going on over there. But what we do know is that a significant number, and maybe the vast majority, are not from Wauwatosa, but they have gotten, so far, just about everything they've demanded. Now, here's where I'm going with this. I don't always take the straight line to get there, but you know what? Life's not a straight line. I contend that this background and context that I give helps people to understand things. So again, leave this as the basis for where we're going now. In Wauwatosa, long-term residents of the community who support the police and support law and order have gotten nowhere with their city government. Their city government instead has done everything that a bunch of agitators who don't live in Wauwatosa have demanded. We're going to get to the why that group of outsiders who have agitated are listened to, and long-term residents of Wauwatosa are ignored by the mayor and city council members and so on. We are going to do this by, and as I say, I don't take straight lines. We are going to do this by diverting to Sheboygan. Now you're wondering how we're diverting to Sheboygan. Well, here's how you get from Wauwatosa to Sheboygan. You go south, getting out of Wauwatosa is the hardest part of this direction thing. I've still never figured out how to get out of Wauwatosa. Once I'm out of Wauwatosa, you get a 994 and go north on 43 and drive, and then you see 16 different exits for Sheboygan, and you figure out which one you're supposed to go to, and if you're in doubt, just take 23 and drive toward the lake, right? Isn't that pretty much it? What is the main one? Is it still 23? There's one that's got a lot of stuff going on up there on it now. Yeah, the mall and all that. Is that 23 or is that a different one? I don't even want to give wrong information. Why? It's never stopped us before. Because people will call to correct you. I like it now when we give wrong information because I like you being bothered by people that are correcting. I don't know why. I'm becoming kind of a dink in my old age, aren't I? I know you're all saying, becoming? Am I more of a dink now than I was 20 years ago? No. See, I'm trying to be. Oh, I don't want to be one of these guys that mellows when he's all old. Well, that's my point. I want to be more of a dink than I was before. I mean, the alternative, I suppose, is just being Biden coming on here and, talking about Billings, Montana and thinking I live there or something. I am telling you, I can't say that watching the Democratic convention is entertaining. I use the analogy, and I stole it from a listener yesterday after watching Monday night, that it was sort of like watching one of those commercials they run in the middle of the night in which you're supposed to give money to some racket that says that they're fighting against animal cruelty, and almost all those organizations are total ripoffs. It's like giving money to certain former Packer athletes foundation and thinking you're supporting the individual charity. I mean, the reason those groups exist is because they pay members large salaries, and they get large salaries because they put these things on TV. But they show these pathetic animals, and there's always a woman with just an unbelievably annoying voice. Look at this. Yeah, slow the video in slow motion. And it's the same thing that has been done with some of the charities that tried to raise money for poor people overseas and so on, but it's especially manipulative with the animals. Anyway, that's what I thought Monday night's Democratic convention was. I mean, it was the most Debbie Downer, whiny, awful, to the point that it was weird. And now Paul's talking about this thing they did on the sofa. I get, of course it's weird. They don't have a convention. There's nobody in Milwaukee. We're used to certain conventions. 10,000 people are at a big packed convention hall. They give speeches. Everybody cheers, yells, and carries on, and it's a stage thing, and so on. We're used to that, and now they've got whatever this is, and it's... Paul says, what did you say? Paul said Biden was scared by the balloons and streamers. Well, you got to be very careful with Joe Biden. I mean, to face it, if you're Joe Biden right now, to say that Joe has a screw loose is just like an improper examination of the mechanicals on this. I mean, I think he only has one that's tightened. To say one is loose is just... Paul points out, Trump had an active shooter near the White House and walked back in unrattled. Joe Biden had a balloon fly past him, and I think he's still on the medication that he's... So anyway... Getting back to where I was, I said we were going to Sheboygan, and I'll stop doing the little road map. In Sheboygan last night, they had a meeting. County board. Sheboygan County is one of those communities where they have proposed one of these ordinances to give broad powers to the county health officer. As you know, we've been tracking these here in southeastern Wisconsin for the last several months. And one came up in Dodge County. We seem to be able to bat it down. One came up in Jefferson County. That one never seems to go away. There was one that was brought up in Walworth County. The public showed up, outraged. We killed that one off. When I say we, I mean people on my side. It was the residents of those communities that did it themselves. All of this, as I've explained in the past, came from the Evers administration and Andrea Palm after the state Supreme Court ruled that the Wisconsin statute that they were using to give these orders is unconstitutional. Evers and Palm and the Wisconsin Counties Association, which is a Madison-based organization run by lefties, has been urging individual counties to essentially pass the same ordinance at the local level, but do it not through the back door. That was the problem with the state law, but do it through the front door. When I say the front door, actually pass it. Have it voted on and enacted as an ordinance. What happened in the Wisconsin law was that the state Supreme Court believed that you can't simply have these, decisions and orders being put out by individuals who are not elected officials. So they're trying to pass an ordinance that they think would allow constitutional muster to give all of these individual counties the same authority that the state claimed that it had prior to the Supreme Court ruling to go in and issue have all of this broad power to enforce health orders. And what has alarmed people is how broadly written these ordinances are. They are frightening to people. And the people are legitimately frightened. One of the things that's happened here in 2020 is we have gone so far off the deep end in so many areas that when people actually read the details of just one of them, they become shocked. Now, I think people would be just as shocked if we sat back and understood that we're firing police officers in Wauwatosa because some guy who likes gang members in Milwaukee decided to, shoot a gun through somebody's window. All of this stuff is shocking. But the ordinances are actually written on paper. And they see that people are voting on them. For instance, if you had an ordinance in Wauwatosa, if a bunch of agitators in Milwaukee, including people who post on social media like gang members want to fire one of our cops, should we do it? Probably people would have showed up in advance and been appalled by that. But these health ordinances, in order to get them legal, they have to write them down and they have to vote on them. And many people in many of these counties, have been tracking this, and they've been very good at using social media and other ways of communicating to get the word out. And the language in these ordinances is, like many other things happening in 2020, just shocking. There is no restraint on this at all. They give power for these bureaucrats in these health agencies to trample on people's individual liberties and rights. And then you keep getting statements from the elected officials that are proposing it or the appointed officials. In Sheboygan County, it's the county administrator, a guy named Payne, who get at their, look, I'm a reasonable person. We would only do this in the case of an emergency, something that was really bad. Well, we know that he's full of crap because we see what's being done right now in the face of COVID, which is not an emergency. It might have been an emergency in New York City during the peak, but nowhere in the state of Wisconsin right now is there an emergency over COVID. Yet we remain with many facilities at 25% occupancy. Schools remain closed. People are under orders to wear masks, all the other stuff that's gone on for something that clearly is not an emergency. So to assume that these health officials are going to show some sort of restraint, they're all a bunch of Kirsten Johnsons. She's the one that runs Ozaukee, Washington County, more on how she turns out to be one of the reasons why these schools in Ozaukee and Washington are suddenly changing course and closing right now. It's because you've got these health officials, unelected, that are going out there and single-handedly abusing their authority and just gut-punching citizens in the stomach by upending their lives, by saying their kids can't go to school, they can't have county fairs, and in some cases, we're going to come in and raid your house because we think someone is sick. Anyway, Sheboygan County's the latest one that had one of these things on the radar, and they discussed it at the county board meeting last night. And the meeting was packed with citizens who showed up. Packed. And they were outraged. And one after the other of them got up and they talked and addressed the county board on how this is a terrible thing. I suspect if they remain diligent in Sheboygan County, they will succeed in killing this. The thing that you have to be aware of is these liberals are very effective. You kill it, they can always bring it back a month later. You just have to stay on top of them. And one of the good things that's happened during this period here is we have a lot of people that are going online now and checking government agendas and monitoring what's going on in their local committees, things that the media used to do, but the media doesn't expose any type of leftist overreach at all. You're not going to get the Sheboygan newspaper to dive in and expose this power grab by the health director and by Adam Payne up there in Sheboygan County. This is going to be something that's going to be discovered by residents on their own. In the same way, I don't think you can count on any media organization to expose what's going on in Ozaukee or Washington County. You're not going to get the media to dive into exactly why Mequon Thiensville betrayed the residents of the community and reversed course and shut down the schools at this meeting that they held only a couple of nights ago. You're not going to have anybody dig into who's saying what to whom and whether or not some of these health officials, a health director has nothing to do with public education. Nothing. There's nothing in their statute of authority that gives them the power to do this, but they stick their beak in and they say, you know what, you should close your schools. So then they have an excuse to go and close the schools. Well, if those officials show so little restraint that they're running around now, messing around with the schools, something that they don't have any, we have school boards. The county health official has nothing to do with the schools, yet there they are. So imagine if we give them this broad slate to just start going into businesses and doing with that, padlock and this, padlock and the other. All this is written in the ordinance. They have the ability to do it. Anyway. Now remember where I was 15 minutes ago. I wanted you not to lose this idea of Wauwatosa was listening more to agitators from Milwaukee, some of whom post on social media how much they love street gangs, that they were listening to their own city residents. I said that was the basis for where we're going now in Sheboygan. I'm going to start connecting these dots and make an important point to you. I'll give you a little bit of a hint. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. Talk 1130 WISN. Best summer in terms of weather we've ever had in the state of Wisconsin, and just wasted with nothing to do. Well, now we're running these commercials for I got all excited. It sounded like there was something you could go to, and then it's, well, no, you stay at home and watch it on TV or something. Or I wish I was in the business of just putting things on. I just put something on just to hack everybody off right now. I mean, by the way, the media is just trying to find some sort of outbreak in Sturgis. It's too early to make any judgments on it because they say you're supposed to give it 14 days. I'm telling you, if two people who work at a drugstore 72 miles away from Sturgis get the coronavirus, they're going to see this is what happens when 250,000 people show up there. And all right, forecast for the next few days, mostly clear tonight, low 65. For the next several days, partly to mostly sunny, 83 for a high Thursday, 85 on Friday. Slight chance of thunderstorms, still partly sunny on Saturday, 85. Sunday, a little bit cooler with temperatures staying in the 70s and a slight chance of thunderstorms. In most of the local communities where some of these draconian health ordinances have been proposed, often sold by dishonest public officials as saying, look, this is actually more limited than what the state could do. That's like China saying, well, okay, fine, we're locking everybody up, but Joe Stalin in Russia was worse. Because of significant public opposition that showed up in person, it looks like many of these things are going to be stopped. Now follow my transition here. Let's move to another area where public opinion is being largely ignored. The reopening of schools. Some of the communities that said that they were going to open their schools have now reversed and turned around and closed them. Or in the case of Germantown, are coming up with a decision that is so muddled that, as I said, is impossible to explain. In almost all of these communities, however, the public opinion of the parents has been overwhelming in terms of opening the schools for 5-day in-person learning. Yet the school boards didn't listen to them. The difference is, and again, there's some exceptions to this, I'm generalizing. In most of these communities, when the school boards held their meeting, they didn't have 250 parents show up screaming and yelling at them, demanding that you open the schools. We've had that with these health ordinances. Before Evers issued his statewide mask mandate, a number of local communities were issuing mask orders of their own. Nobody was showing up at meetings to object to them. Whether you agree with it or not, the reason that we have these mask orders is that very few people seem to object to them. These health ordinances, though, that give you this broad, massive power, this has tripped people's trigger. And they're showing up. Now, here's the lesson in all of this. Public officials, especially at the local level, respond far greater to public opinion that they see and hear When you show up and one after another tell him something, that makes an impact. Unfortunately, again, this is an area where the left has an advantage. When the left voices its public opinion, it riots. When the right voices its public opinion, we write an email. That's just the way it is. Look at Wauwatosa. Protest, riot, go on everybody's grass, scream and yell 2 a.m, shoot a shotgun toward the window, throw rocks around, storm through the mall, block the streets. What do the people on the other side do? They made an email to the mayor. No, the reason for that is most people on the right are polite, orderly people. And they believe that as a resident, their polite email that they sign should be given as much, if not more weight, than the screaming taunts that are hurled by somebody that doesn't even live in the city. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. The mayor of Wauwatosa, Dennis McBride, has made it clear he doesn't much care what the residents of Wauwatosa who send him an email say. He's far more motivated by some people who live in the city of Milwaukee walking down his city streets with shotguns blocking traffic. No, there is a happy medium. Dodge County, Sheboygan County, Walworth County, some of the others that I mentioned where there were opposition to these health ordinances. When people show up, and again, one person showing up doesn't do much good. But you can't get to 200 unless you start with one. 200 people is simply 200 different one persons, if you know what I mean. This is where organization and people getting things organized and getting people to come together, this really matters. This is what moves the needle in terms of how public officials respond. I tried to tell the audience forever, nobody listens to me. An email is fine, phone calls are better. The phone call, somebody on the other end, as a staff or whatever, has to end up talking to you. If you phone call a school board member and they have to talk to you, it ends up having a greater impact than when they're just reading your email, if they read it at all. Here's the next thing about this. I wish the following statement was not correct, but it is correct. Being polite doesn't work. Again, I wish I was wrong about that, and I'm not advocating being an obnoxious jerk. I'm saying being polite doesn't work. The pro-police supporters in Wauwatosa have been polite. The anti-police agitators have been rude, disruptive, and in some cases criminal. What's worked? Now let's compare two people on the right, two groups on the right. The people opposed to these health ordinances, I'll grant you, they've not always been real polite. I watched a good chunk of that meeting in Sheboygan County last night. People were mad and they were rather, they were volatile. They got up there and they talked and they're screaming and yelling and this, that, and the other thing. The parents that are asking the schools to be reopened, they write their nice reasoned email. I wish being polite worked. But it does it with local government officials screaming and yelling at him and calling him a monster. That's what gets their attention. I'm not advocating it. I'm just saying this is how they respond. So the lesson you learn from this is, I'm not saying don't email your public officials. It's better than nothing. But an in-person contact in which you're pretty clear with what your opinion is more effective. That old line, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Well, the squeakiest wheels of all are people that are rioting. We have seen across the country. Look at Portland. Anybody argue that the rioters have now completely won? This violence is out of control right now in Portland. It is getting worse every single night, and the police are not responding at all. Seattle, the rioters have won. In Wauwatosa, the protesters who have become rioters, they're winning. One of the reasons, this is really good now, one of the reasons the left hates Trump This is real good. You ready for this? Trump is kind of like a conservative riot. Trump, the impact of Trump, the way he expresses himself and gets back at everybody's face, he's like our riot. No Republican raises hell the way Donald Trump does. He gets everybody's attention and has an impact. He, in other words, gets in your face in the same way that Frank Nitti gets in your face. The left can't stand it when their tactics that they use all the time are applied against them. In other words, Trump fights back. Trump also tries to harness public opinion. When he could hold his rallies, Trump would get 5,000-10,000 people to show up to hear him. The squeaky wheel gets the grace. The frustration that many in Wisconsin have had with Republicans in the state legislature who have sometimes fought very hard is you never really get the impression that there's any stick in the elbow in the face. There's Jonathan Brostoff, whose district is on the east side of Milwaukee, showing up at riots in Wauwatosa. We don't see any Republican members of the legislature physically showing up in person, raising hell over some of the awful things that are going on to harm us. People want you to fight back. Now, I grant you, it's not the nature of a decent person to go into some other community and raise hell in the middle of the night the way some of these Democrats are doing. But the left is fighting. They're fighting, breaking every rule that's out there. They're rioting. In the case of Portland and Seattle, it's outright insurrection. In the case of Wauwatosa, look at what happened at Wauwatosa. By the way, I'm waiting for the first media outlet to come out and call David Bowen a liar. David Bowen is a bald-faced liar. He went out in the media and he said Officer Mensah fired that shotgun himself. We got to have a guy criminally charged with doing it. What TV station has put a camera in David Bowen's face and demanded hey, Bowen, you were there. Why did you lie? And for that matter, we haven't had any members of the state assembly call for a censure or a sanction against Bowen for lying about this, taking part in essentially a riot, and then nothing from Robin or anybody else in the legislature to censure him for getting up and lying about it. And for that matter, the Journal printing the liar's lies. Of course, he's lying. We have a guy criminally charged with shooting the gun. I guess the district attorney's office, are they lying to Bowen, or were you a liar? Now, my point here, we all know what my style is. My personal, I'm not running around yelling and screaming and so on. It's not the proper forum to be able to do it. But on this show, so my opinion is heard, I don't mince any words and I try to speak clearly and loudly. That works. That's what gets people's attention. With regard to all the stuff that's going on in our society right now, if you want to object to some of this stuff, again, I'm not telling you not to write the email. I'm saying you might be a little bit uncomfortable. And I get people are shy. And it's hard for people, they see the person at a church or the grocery store and so on. It's hard for them to tell off a school board member. If some of those school board members in Oak Creek were told off for the way they sold out their community, if some of the school board members in Mequon, you've got a member of the school board in Mequon who's a tutor. Believe it or not, he's a tutor. He's going to tutor the very kids that aren't going to go into the school so he can line his own pockets with the decision he made to close the school. If he had a number of residents in that community tell him off for what he did here, ask him why in the world you're listening to a health officer who's, Kristen Johnson, who has nothing to do with education and nothing to do with raising children, why you're taking her input on this, and demand to know why you are listening to these people and selling us out. And if they had to hear it, and again, I understand that's kind of a rude thing to do. But what do you think the teachers have been doing forever? You saw how they act up on Act 10. You see what they've been doing behind the scenes. They're berating and yelling at people. It works. Look at what's going on at every one of these protests and look at the way they conduct themselves and look at how in almost every single community they got their way. Look at Milwaukee. Who got fired? Chief Morales got fired. The loud and obnoxious got their way. And again, I'm not advocating louder and obnoxious, but I am saying that if you want to see a roadmap as to how to block things from a conservative perspective, look at what's happening with these health ordinances where A, people get informed, B, they get the word out, and C, they show up. And I know regular people can't show up at 97 meetings and my side isn't going to go out and riot in the street. But until public officials show the same respect, and I'll use Wauwatosa as a guinea pig, until Mayor McBride and the city council and that goof on the west side, Coforth and so on, until they're willing to listen to the tax-paying residents of the community with at least the same attention that they're willing to give an advocate of the gangster disciples who's firing shotguns in people's houses. You may as well up the ante, up the game a little bit, because that's what these public officials are saying when they keep sucking up to people that are disruptive, that break the law and show violence, and keep ignoring regular old citizens who politely express their opinion. And as I say, I don't know how long I'm going to run the clock on the state assembly sanctioning David Bowen for lying about. I mean, he went out and he lied about an attack in which somebody could have been killed, a shotgun going off. He said Mensah fired that gun. Can you imagine if a Republican just made that up about somebody, if a Republican member of the assembly just lied and accused somebody else of firing a shotgun? You'd never hear the end of it. Same thing with Brostov. What in the world do we have a Democratic state assemblyman from Milwaukee going around taking part in riots going on in Wauwatosa? Well, they're not all riots. Don't use that word. Well, I'll guarantee you what happened at Mensah's house was Mensah's girlfriend's house. That was a riot. It's a riot. It's a riot. It was a riot. What happened the other night was a borderline riot where you had for an hour and a half people getting in the face of police officers and screaming every curse word at them again and again and again and again with the elected Democratic members of the state assembly there. And who do the power structure of Wauwatosa listen to? The people yelling and screaming and berating the cops. The level of support for the Wauwatosa Police Department within Wauwatosa City government right now is, so far as I can tell, limited to one alderman. Every other alderman has sold them out, and the mayor has essentially flipped them off. And the people in Wauwatosa who don't like that, again, I wish the following, as I said, I wish this wasn't true. You've been nice and polite about it, and that isn't working. Fire a shotgun in somebody's yard, oh, then you'll get the mayor, you get Wauwatosa, oh, then they'll bow and scrape and fall all over themselves to do what you want to do. Look at the tactics that they used to try to get Mensah fired, and so far they've gotten him suspended. They've broken every rule of civility in the book. And look at what the supporters of Officer Mensah have done. They have been polite, contacted their officials, and spoken out. Who won? Ditto. How are we stopping these health ordinances? People are raising hell. Why are we losing on all these other things out there? Because all we're doing is writing emails. Again, I wish this was not true. I'm just telling you what is true. And that's why I connected the Wauwatosa to the Sheboygan. News Talk 1130 WISN. Mark Belling, late afternoon show. Going to give you the sizzling summer cash contest text in word for the 4 o'clock hour. Word for this hour is cash. C-A-S-H, cash. You have until 5 p.m. to text in cash to 200-200. You'll get a text confirming entry plus iHeartRadio info, standard data and message rate supply in this nationwide contest. Now, I was commenting earlier about lobbying local government, especially, say, not the city of Milwaukee, but Dodge County, Sheboygan County is a good example, Ozaukee County, Germantown School Board, Greendale School Board, etc. Governmental bodies like that. When you have the kind of thing that's occurred in Wauwatosa, where in a suburban community suddenly you have protesters and rioters and disruption. As I indicated, it gets the attention of public officials to the point that they ignore and tune out their own residents. These are people who, by and large, I mean, you get elected in Wauwatosa, you're not generally somebody who's thought of as being the most strong-willed person in the world. I mean, some may be, some may not be. But you see Mayor McBride sitting up there with his mask. Do you think that he had the ability of, say, a Donald Trump to tell a bunch of outsiders who are out there trying to ruin people's lives that we're not going to allow rioters from Milwaukee to come in and destroy our Wauwatosa Police Department? He didn't have that ability. Now, Wauwatosa is a community that has been trending left in the first place. But I think we have seen this acquiescence to pressure from the left, even in more conservative areas. In the communities that have chosen to keep the schools closed or go to these kind of goofy hybrid proposals, you're getting clearly two groups of input. One group or two, I'll say it, two groups of input. One group is the parents, open the schools. The other is the teachers and the school employees, close the schools. Who do you think has been louder and more obnoxious with their message? Well, we know it's almost impossible for any group of human beings to be louder or obnoxious than unionized school teachers, so probably them. So the tone, the strength of the message, it matters. And again, I wish that it didn't. There's a third component here to this, and this is where I'm going to wrap up the topic and move on. One of the points that I have tried to make over the years is that in many cases, rather conservative communities, the elected officials in those communities are much more liberal than the communities as a whole. Not always. But for example, just grab Community X. I don't want to use an example because it might disprove my point, and I don't know who's on every village board or school board. But let's just say Community X. Suppose Community X went 68% for Trump in the latest election. Very likely that the village board or city council in Community X didn't go 68% for Trump, maybe 50-50. And the school board might not even be that much. In other words, the people who run for public office, even in conservative areas, some are conservative, but as a group, they tend to be less conservative than the community as an overall. Part of this is because liberals are likelier to just run for stuff. All these social service agencies, when you see us on the boards of directors, it's one pack of lefties after another. One of the reasons most conservatives work, we got time on our hands. What do lefties do? They work for another nonprofit. All they do is go to meetings all day and so on. It's just part of who seeks these things. School boards. Who runs for the school board? Some cases, staunch right-wingers, usually not. So part of the problem that you have here is even in a conservative community, you're being run by somebody who would fit in just fine in Madison. I want to share with you a story about Hartford. Hartford's in Washington County. It's part of that area of Washington County where 40 years ago nobody lived, and now everybody lives up there. Slinger, Hartford, Richfield, that whole area. Hartford is, what's in Washington County? I don't know, 10 miles of West Bend? Am I right on that? Or not? Anyway, Hartford. Very conservative community. They have like many of our communities, kind of an unusual school board structure. And I want to stress, to make this clear here, because some people are going to hear me wrong. It's kind of like the way they do it in Arrowhead. Arrowhead has all these little elementary school districts that feed into a different school district that runs Arrowhead High School. In Hartford, there's a school board that runs Hartford High School. But there are different school boards that run the elementary and middle schools. You following me on this? I know it's confusing. This is not the school board that runs Hartford Union High School. I'm not talking about that. This is Hartford School Board District 1. They run some elementary and middle schools in Hartford. There is a member of that school board who on social media is praising Colin Kaepernick for taking a knee during the national anthem and claiming that this is an outstanding peaceful protest. She advocates taking a knee for the anthem. She also, on her social media page, praises the message of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Now, as I say, this is one of the most conservative communities in southeastern Wisconsin, yet on their school board, they've got somebody who believes that we should kneel for the national anthem and thinks that AOC is right. Her name is Erin Wilk. I only know this because somebody in that community is checking out who's running their local government now that we're beginning to realize that a lot of people, even in conservative areas, are being governed by glorified Marxists. So, Mark, look at this. You won't believe where this is from. This is Hartford. This woman's politics would fit in on the east side of Milwaukee and Shorewood and Madison, Beijing. Yet she got elected in Hartford. So, again, when you wonder why, when left-wingers come in and they agitate on something in a conservative area, why they roll over so quickly and agree to them, many of the people in local government, even in conservative communities, are lefties themselves. Now, this is where a guy like me is not of much help to you. I mean, I just frankly can't pay attention to who's running for the school board in Hartford School District, Hartford District number 1. Then there's like a district number 2. Then there's the Hartford High School Board, all these other communities. I mean, there's hundreds of these communities. If you don't want to be run by liberals, you can't elect a liberal. If you don't want to be run by people who think that we should take a knee for the national anthem, you need to make sure that you're not voting for somebody who takes a knee for the national anthem. This is one area where social media can come in handy because sometimes some of these radicals out themselves. So as we see, in many cases, government moving radically to the left and doing things that are terrifying us, like the proposal of these health ordinances or these school districts that are refusing to open school months after COVID broke out, even though the COVID numbers are radically lower than we feared and the problem has been less severe than we thought it was going to be, and kids don't get this. Understand that even in conservative areas, many of our decision makers that we have elected are ultra-liberal people themselves. And finally, when there is a squeaky, cranky conservative fly in the ointment, they'll use every opportunity they can to get rid of them. Like in Germantown. Guy's just a swimming coach. Did he express things perfectly well? Of course not. Criticize Black Lives Matter, they'll compare it to the KKK. And based on what we're seeing some Black Lives Matters do and members do in some communities, maybe it's a valid comparison, but hacked off school officials in Germantown. They fired him as a swim coach. This is never done where anybody ever goes out and tries to purge somebody who has extreme views from the left. In Hartford, you can advocate taking a knee for the national anthem and not worry at all about who that will offend. That's what a school board member does. But in Germantown, the school board member managed to get rid of a swim coach because he dared to criticize a Marxist organization that, while it does include some peaceful members, also has members that have been involved in rioting across this country. Look at Portland and look at what Black Lives Matter is doing in its name there. And then understand that in Germantown, you've got a guy who can't even coach there because your school board stood up for arrogant and abusive school administrators who at the same time, they're keeping a lot of kids out of school for day-to-day instruction, managed to make sure that we don't even have an assistant swimming coach who's not even a teacher with any kind of right-wing viewpoints. All of this is eye-opening. And the lengthy discussion that I had here is my attempt to explain how it works. And if you want to do anything about it, as I said, politeness doesn't work anymore. And it's just demonstrated that being polite with the Germantown School Board and being polite with Sarah Unerdal as she's running around trying to ruin coaches' careers because she doesn't like somebody's view on Black Lives Matter and trying to get on them and, keep this school closed. The politeness simply hasn't worked. What's apparently worked is what Black Lives Matter does. What apparently works is what Frank Nitti does. Raise hell, scream, yell, and break every rule of civil society. That's how you get local government apparently to do exactly what you want. Again, I am not advocating it, and I'm not saying I wish it were true, but it is true. Ending up from Milwaukee, this is the Mark Belling Late Afternoon Show on News Talk 1130 WYSN. The Milwaukee County District Attorney's Office has brought criminal charges against 3 men in connection with the incident that occurred a week and a half ago in Wauwatosa, in which a protest at the home of a Milwaukee police officer who is the girlfriend of Wauwatosa police officer Joseph Mensah became violent and out of control. It started with protesters vandalizing the property of the young woman's home, toilet papering the house, throwing things at the house, and so on. It ended with then had Officer Mensah come out of the home with his dog, trying to confront the individuals that were vandalizing the home, which resulted in a chaotic response that included the shooting off of firecrackers and then a shotgun blast. There were stones and rocks and objects thrown through the window of the home. Vandalism, as I said, occurred and so on. We know that at least one member of the Wisconsin State Legislature claims that he was there. Representative David Bowen of Milwaukee. Jonathan Brostoff's been involved in some of these things in Wauwatosa as well. Following that incident, there were initially claims by some of the protesters that they didn't do anything wrong. And David Bowen, a member of the Wisconsin State Assembly, was quoted on JS Online claiming that Mensah's version of events was untrue, and then claimed that it was Mensah himself that actually pulled the trigger on the shotgun. Now, there were some people after that story came out who were wondering whether or not Officer Mensah might have been exaggerating what happened and whether Bowen was telling the truth. Well, the Milwaukee County District Attorney's Office is run by a Democrat, and they have made the decision here to charge criminally 3 individuals in connection with the incident that occurred here, and every indication is that Bowen was lying. He either didn't know what he was talking about and made it up, or he saw it with his own eyes and is a bald-faced liar. The individuals involved were arrested over the last several days, and criminal charges were brought a couple of days ago. To my knowledge, the first place that this was reported is on a website called WisconsinRightNow.com. The 3 individuals that are facing criminal charges are faced with a variety of allegations, but Ronald, and this, I'm going to use his middle name here because this is a very common name, Ronald Demetrian Bell Jr. I'm sure there are a lot of people with the name Ronald Bell. So this is Ronald Demetrian Bell Jr., who lives in Milwaukee. William Duvall Lofton is the other person other individual who is principally accused of taking part in the incident. I've read the criminal complaint. It's a man named Niles McKee who faces charges as well. The most serious charges are against Bell. The criminal complaint goes into very lengthy detail, and it is clear that they did a lot of reviewing of video that was taken, probably cell phone video, from a number of the individuals that were on the scene and being able to piece together what happened. They also have cooperative statements from a couple of the individuals who are charged here implicating the main actor. Among the charges against Bell are second-degree recklessly endangering safety, use of a dangerous weapon, battery to a law enforcement officer as a party to a criminal act. For Lofton, second-degree recklessly endangering safety, and so on. Now, again, I'm not going to go into all the details of the criminal complaint because I don't have the time to do so here. Suffice to say that what we had was the logical extension of the sort of thing that is going to occur when a community makes the decision, as Wauwatosa did, to simply allow overt lawlessness. What was happening in Wauwatosa was building day after day after day. It started with marching down the streets and yelling and screaming. And it kept getting worse and kept getting worse. And as I said at the time, the turning point was when the Wauwatosa City Council voted to ask the Fire and Police Commission to fire Officer Mensah. This threw gasoline on the fire because the people that were coming in largely from outside Wauwatosa to demonstrate and rip the police realized that their tactics were working. Imagine you have a 2-year-old child. I hear that's when they're the worst. Is that true? Kids are brattiest at the age of 2, that they're terrible 2s, they call them. So peak brattiness would be 2, right? Paul agrees with this. If you have a problem with it, should I have people call up and give you your input on what year is the worst? No, Paul does not want it. Paul does not want any input generally, apparently, on anything. So let's suppose you have like a 2-year-old that's at his highest level of brattiness. And he yells and screams and yells and screams and yells and screams. And every time he yells and screams, you give him whatever it is that he wants. What's he learned? To yell and scream. The Wauwatosa rioters were the equivalent of the 2-year-old. They were yelling and screaming, behaving like brats, and carrying out in the middle of the night and honking horns and yelling and standing on sidewalks and blocking traffic. Showing up at meetings of the city council, not speaking in turn, but simply yelling and screaming during the meeting. And then they got what they wanted. Now, nincompoops think, well, okay, they got what they want, they'll go away. Apparently, you don't know how to raise a 2-year-old. Because you never go away when you get what you want. You simply start asking for more and more and more and more. Once the protesters realized that they were able to get Mensah, and there would be no punishment for disturbing the peace, blocking streets, violating traffic laws, harassing people in their individual yards, holding protests without a permit, all the laws that have been violated from the beginning during this, when they realized there were no consequences for that, in other words, no downside, but they were getting the upside of getting what they wanted, it was inevitable that they keep pushing this. As we've seen in certain other cities like Seattle, Portland, etc., often they end up taking these protests to individual homes. So they went to Mensah's house. This is a police officer whose girlfriend is a police officer. There's children in the house. The only reason you go to his house and then scream at the top of his lungs and then try to vandalize by toilet papering and throwing stuff out, you're trying to provoke him. That was their goal. They were trying to be provocative. I think they wanted Mensah to come out and shoot his gun again. That's what I believe from the beginning. I think that was the goal. Oh, look, Mensah tried to kill another one of us. But he didn't. He came out without his gun, but with his dog. And somehow a shotgun goes off, and it wasn't Officer Mensah's shotgun. It was brought by a protester. We have been told from the beginning by media that are spinning this story. I have thoughts on which TV station is the worst, but I'm not going to express it because I haven't watched all of them with equal levels. But it is apparent to me that everybody who is set out to cover these protests in Wauwatosa supports the protesters. Because they have looked the other way, and we managed to, and I get that on TV you can't show curse words and so on. But they have done everything they can to show the most peaceful moments of this. On my website, belling.com, earlier in the week, I put up a video that was put together by one of the protesters. About an hour of the exchange that went on Friday night, this past Friday night in Wauwatosa, where these cops, and again, it's not the fault of the individual cops. It's not even the fault of Chief Weber, because I think he's being shoved around by the mayor. But you have police officers here who have essentially turned into, again, I don't want to be insulting here, but Wauwatosa's police department right now looks to me to be a joke. It's just a joke. You agree with that? I think they look like a joke. They look like pansies, cowards, sissies. My whole life, I've never thought I could walk up to a police officer and scream at the top of my lungs, what a no good, dirty, rotten, and I'm cleaning it up, piece of you-know-what, garbage, miserable, for an hour. How can you do that to a cop and a cop allow you to do it? Now, I realize the individual cops are under orders. They're told they can't do anything about it. This is violation in 97 zillion different laws, including disorderly conduct. But these police officers are taking it again and again and again and again and again and again and again. And then the media comes on the next night and tells people that there was a peaceful protest. What in the world is their definition of the word peace? Is peace that somebody didn't get murdered? Is that what peace means? When I think of peace, I think like of Tiny Tim strumming his ukulele, or Yanni playing his crappy music, or somebody playing the Ravi Shankar playing the sitar, kumbaya, people walking around with flowers. There's a term called peace and quiet. Peace isn't simply, well, they didn't kill anybody. This is hardly peaceful. It was raucous, obnoxious, mean-spirited, loud, and out of control. And it is aimed at provoking. The only reason you scream in somebody's face for an hour is you're trying to get him to shove you back so you can claim the police are being violent again. So who are these peaceful protesters? It's been remarkable how few of their names ever come out. Nobody in the media seems to try to figure out who they are, whether or not any of them, in fact, are criminals with criminal records. Instead, we're just told they're peaceful protesters, and we automatically accept that they're peaceful protesters because that's what some bubble-headed TV reporter wearing sneakers says as she marches alongside them. But if you actually see some of the raw video, this is hardly peaceful. It's mean-spirited. It's ugly. Well, we finally have some names because some people have been arrested and charged. So we can look into their backgrounds. And I do want to credit this website, Wisconsin Right Now, which apparently is one of the latest projects that Jessica McBride is involved in. She's been around the block a few times. And she's now onto this, and they broke a pretty good story here. One of the guys involved has a prominent social media profile in which he goes on and on and on about a lot of things. And there's photos of him appearing, well, I don't know if they're fake, but I mean appearing to be using drugs and commenting at length positively about the Gangsta Disciples, which is a well-known violent street gang. Well, that's sure an interesting perspective that we had not been told before, and one that I wonder if anybody's going to pick up on. So now we find out that these peaceful protesters, at least one of them, and one of them involved in the criminal act that dealt with the shotgun situation that occurred here, is apparently a big advocate of a violent street gang. Peaceful protesters, huh? So anyway, that story is out there. There are charges. I am pessimistic as to whether or not anything's going to be done. This strikes me as the kind of thing that John Chisholm's going to want to plea bargain down to nothing as fast as he possibly can. On the other hand, he's got to deal with law enforcement officers in every suburban community of southeastern Wisconsin plus Milwaukee. And I can tell you, because I hear from a lot of them, that police officers throughout this region are furious that nobody has their backs right now in local government. That you can just go to a cop's house and this, remember, the cop who, I want to make a point here, and I don't, going on too long. This story has been, and I get why it's sort of misreported because it's a little confusing because it's a very close boyfriend-girlfriend situation. The cop whose house this was is a Milwaukee police officer. It's not Officer Mensah. She has a right to have, you know, the love life and personal situation of her choice. It's her home. A Milwaukee police officer's house was put under siege in Wauwatosa. Every cop in this area is watching to see whether or not you can just do that and get away with it. Now, we know that Wauwatosa has a mayor and a city council that are more than willing to let them get away with it and have been more than willing to allow and get this criminality to go on from the very beginning. We know that Wauwatosa city councils have even people who call themselves conservatives, like this buffoon named Coforth from the West Side, who has the backbone of, I was going to say a jellyfish. How about a dead jellyfish? Could I get even limper than a jellyfish? You can't even get anybody to get up and say we stand for law and order in Wauwatosa and we are going to not allow people to shoot shotguns at cops' houses. Oh, but they're peaceful. No, they're not. This was not peaceful. The last round of them were not peaceful. I said in Milwaukee that I felt the first round of protests we had in the city of Milwaukee, usually the ones that Frank Nitti was leading, were largely peaceful. They were loud, but I said they were largely peaceful. I stand by that. Some got disruptive, the cutting on people's grass, driving on people's properties, and so on, but they were largely peaceful. The only one that I felt that got to the level of not being peaceful was the situation on McKinley where the tear gas is fired. The looting that occurred was not peaceful, and some of the stuff that occurred outside some of the police district stations were not peaceful. Wauwatosa has been in a different category. There has been a remarkable lack of curiosity from the media as to just who these individuals are that are taking part in this behavior that has been increasingly obnoxious. It will be very interesting to see, and I would encourage you to check out their websites and watch the newscast to see how much coverage local television gives the individuals that were involved in shooting a shotgun at a cop's house while a riot was going on. Now that we have criminal charges, now that we have names, and now that we have the ability to dive into the backgrounds of each of these individuals. And as I was saying earlier in the program, we now have a criminal complaint that seems to indicate that David Bowen, a member of the state assembly who said Mensah pulled the trigger himself, is an out-and-out liar. I would encourage Speaker Boss and the Republican leadership to call for a censure of Bowen, and I would even suggest call a hearing here to discuss whether or not he ought to be expelled from the state assembly, or if there is a level by which he can be expelled from the state assembly for lying about the actions of a law enforcement officer. This guy said a cop shot a shotgun at a crowded riot. He didn't. Bowen made that up. The media knows he made it up. Everybody now knows he made it up. Bowen knows he made it up. So there. Did you think when Bowen said Mensah pulled the trigger himself that there was a chance it was true? 1%, 2%? You said no. You don't think it crossed your mind? It crossed my mind. Well, that's my point. That's 1%, 2%. Crossed your mind. That's what Bowen did. After all that Mensah's been through, after all that committee has been through, here's a guy whose district is in Milwaukee coming in and lying about what happened at a riot. When police come in to investigate things, one of the things, we got some public officials here. Maybe they'll be a good witness. Instead, you got a liar. Did Bowen tell the police officers on the scene when they came to investigate that he lied that way to them too? You get these reporters, they'll ask Trump in the press conferences all the time, why do you lie about this? Why do you lie about that? Can you imagine somebody from Channel 6 or Channel 12 walking up to David Bowen and say, why'd you lie about this? Their pink sneakers would turn chartreuse first. When did we get such a bunch of sissified? It's not just that they're liberals, coward. I swear if these people were around in 1938, they would have been stenographers for Joe Stalin. Oh, okay. Nice thought. Can we show how pretty the gulags are that you run here? Am I not right about this? Well, I had a TV reporter. I won't tell you who he was. He was telling me he's not in it anymore. He said, look, Mark, you would not believe this is now an entry-level job being a TV reporter in Milwaukee. Nobody gets anything, and a lot of them aren't very good. It's an entry-level job. It used to be that an entry-level job would be like Pocatello, Idaho. Or using Wisconsin as an example, Rhinelander was an entry-level job for a TV reporter. And you had to be good to get hired in Rhinelander. Most people who came out of college couldn't get a job. And Rhinelander would be your break. You get to Rhinelander, and from there, maybe you go the next step up. Green Bay was a good step up, maybe Madison. And if you were spectacular after a few years, you could get to Milwaukee. No, straight out of college. They hand a camera in their one-man band, and they walk around and they cover the news. Is it any surprise that they're so easily buffaloed by some of these charismatic figures that are running these protests? And that they're so over their heads that they can't tell the difference between an out-and-out riot with shotguns fired at cops' houses from peaceful protests? I ask very good questions here, don't I? And don't they all answer themselves? 456. By the way, the Journal can't get anything right. Of all the Brewers that, I get that these baseball games end after their deadline. Did you see who they write the puff piece about today? Phelps. If you didn't know it, you would have just said he's going to be the guy that was the losing pitcher last night. And it was not last night's game was no pitcher's fault. I mean, it went on forever, and the Twins finally scored a run. But Brewer bullpen's just been phenomenal. But it's just another case of that was, I will grant you, as games go, that was a fascinating baseball game. And again, looked like the Brewers were going to be go ahead. Ketameda took a no-hitter into the ninth inning, and somehow the inning ended, and he didn't even have the lead anymore. And the game went on forever, and the Brewers lost in 12, 4-3. But sure was an interesting game to watch. News Talk 1130 WISN, Mark Belling, late afternoon show. In a moment, the Citizen Summer Cash Contest, text in word. I made an executive decision during the break to go back and read what David Bowen told the media the day after the incident and read from the criminal complaint as to what happened. First of all, I should stress that according to the criminal complaint, Ronald Bell has confessed. In the criminal complaint, he admits pulling the trigger on the shotgun. He also admits that he did this while he was confronting Officer Mensah and the other police officer who is Mensah's girlfriend. And he admits that he struck Mensah. This is in the criminal complaint. He admitted it. Let me read, without reading the whole thing. Bell admitted that he was the individual with the shotgun during the August 8th incident. Bell also stated that the gun discharged while he was holding it, striking the residence while he was confronting, and then Mensah's initials, and then the girlfriend. Bell agreed that his behavior was reckless and dangerous when he physically confronted Mensah while he was holding a loaded shotgun, and that he put several people in danger when the shotgun discharged. Bell also acknowledged that he was striking Mensah and that he knew that Mensah was a police officer. Bell was aware that the group was at the location due to actions Mensah had previously taken while performing duties as a police officer, and Bell stated that he has been at several other events regarding Mensah's actions with the same group of people. Bell apologized for his actions. So Ronald Bell, the shooter, has apologized. This is what David Bowen told the media after this event, for which Ronald Bell has now admitted, I was reckless and has apologized. Quote, it's very clear. Officer Mensah displayed behavior to push the safety on that firearm and to fire it. He saw an opportunity to paint protesters as the violent mob, and it played into his testimony. I saw the struggle ensue. That's a key point. Bowen said he saw it. I saw the struggle ensue. So he's putting himself out here as an eyewitness. So that's what Bowen put out. Now, according to various media accounts, Bowen's not talking today. He's referring people to, guess who his lawyer is? Kimberly Motley. Kimberly Motley, who's representing all of the people who were shot by Officer Mensah in these 3 civil suits that are out there. Well, Motley is now representing somebody who tried to shoot at, well, I guess 2. We know that at least 2 of the individuals involved so far shot at Mensah as well. So Motley, if Motley wants to, represent people who were shot by somebody, maybe she needs to start representing Officer Mensah, since he appears now to be the one that's getting the gunshots directed at him. We have certainly seen in so many of the stories that are going on in our society right now that out-and-out dishonesty and lying is a tactic that works. And it's fueled in the number of the protests that are going on, and it's fueled a lot of the conduct and behavior that's going on, and it's fueled the statements that are being made about President Trump and the post office. The situation in Wauwatosa, though, is the ultimate in a volatile situation. You have an otherwise rather peaceful community Disturbances that have gone on night after night after night after night. You have very, very weak leadership in the community that chose to not respond with strength to this, but instead by caving into people who don't even live in their community. Then you have the ultimate situation blow up. Somebody, remember, Bell, in order for Bell to pull the trigger on a loaded shotgun, he had to bring a loaded shotgun to this event. And I want people to remember that. Why did he bring a loaded shotgun to Officer Mensah's house? Why did he do that? Now, if people aren't aware, in all these peaceful protests that have been going on, there have been a lot of loaded shotguns. Where Frank Nitti has gone, he had, I forget the guy's name, his personal, Triplet. Andre Triplet's walking around with his loaded gun. There have been a lot of loaded guns at these events. Even though lefties claim that they're so bothered by people running around with guns, there's been a lot of loaded guns at these events. In this case, Bell brought a loaded shotgun. Again, why do you bring to a peaceful protest a loaded shotgun? But he acknowledges that he shouldn't have fired it. But we have a loaded shotgun, a shotgun that is now fired at the house of a police officer who is the girlfriend of Officer Mensah, with all of these other people around there. Had Wauwatosa police not shown extreme restraint, they might have responded to this scene with shots themselves. You've got an officer under fire. Everything about this story was close to being a nightmarish disaster. And in the middle of all of it, is David Bowen trying to calm things down? Elected state official? No, instead he runs to the media and lies through his teeth about what happened. And continues to blame Mensah. As I said, you would think after a certain point the light bulb would go on over the heads of Heather Kuhl, Mayor McBride, and Wussy Colforth, and some of the other leaders in Wauwatosa, that maybe there'd be a little bit of integrity from the AOC of Wauwatosa, Robin Vining, and she'd stand up and suggest that maybe Wauwatosa police deserve some support and some of these violent insurrectionists coming in from Milwaukee should stop the criminal behavior that's going on. But there's no reason to be optimistic about this. The process to fire Mensah remains in place. There's still protests scheduled. You hear rumblings there's going to be another one this weekend, and rumblings is all you ever get on this. It's hard to get this stuff nailed down. And no real accountability from anyone in the media toward the behavior of any of the people who have been out there. You know, we use rhetoric here, and you can, Bowen might say, well, I wasn't saying he literally pulled the trigger. I was saying it was a figurative pulling the trigger. You have people throwing the literal gasoline on the fire here with some of these elected officials that are showing up and fueling these things, knowing that remember, everybody saw these people with shotguns. They know exactly what this could have turned into. And if you saw the thing that occurred Friday night, which was a full week after the shooting that occurred at Mensah's house, where you had about 150 people on the streets, all of them screaming at the top of their lungs in the faces of these police officers, you have people that are trying to turn Wauwatosa into Portland. And very much like Portland, you have a city official leadership in Wauwatosa that seems to either be acquiescing to them, if not out and out supporting them. And I think Mayor McBride is very, very close to simply out and out supporting the anti-police mob. When you hear him say, well, I can't fire Chief Weber, it's a little too hard to do. It's not Barry Weber should not be fired. He's a great police chief. It's not that Officer Mensah behaved legally in every one of his situations. It's not, I don't want a bunch of people coming into Wauwatosa breaking the laws. It's, well, I'd like to fire everybody here and make all of you rioters happy, but it's just hard for me to do it. I'm just a wussy liberal. What do you expect from me? You guys are the ones with the riot. You got to go to work. You got to create more hell. To say that McBride's been a disappointment in this would be the ultimate understatement. And like I said, he's a liberal. He's in over his head, and expecting a liberal to show backbone against riotous protesters is the same as expecting Nancy Pelosi to stand up to AOC. They are incapable of doing it. And Joe Biden will be incapable of doing it if he becomes president, and these people will steamroll over him in the same way that the lefties in Madison have steamrolled over Tony Evers. Liberals cannot stand up to anyone. Now, people have asked questions about Republicans and their inability to show backbone as well. It's a major problem in general. And it's one of the reasons why over the last several months we have moved so radically to the left in this country. There has been a difficulty that people have had in knowing how to resist. As I mentioned in an earlier segment on the program, the way that you resist is you have to show up and make your voices heard. Stopping these health orders in some areas is one of the ways that people have been successful. Getting the schools reopened is an area where some communities have been successful and others have not. As for a situation like Wauwatosa, this is writing the book on what not to do. How to essentially allow your community to fall apart and go to hell by Dennis McBride and Heather Kuhl. They ought to go put it on the bestseller list. If you want to have a city not fall apart, do the exact opposite of Heather Kuhl and Dennis McBride, right? Maybe they can go out on the speaker tour. We're two idiots. We watched our city go to hell. This is what we did. Go the opposite of us. We're too stupid to know what to do over here ourselves. Am I being too tough on McBride? Is he just a glorified Joe Biden in over his head behind the mask there? Or what do you think? He's in over his head. So am I being too hard on him? Well, but if he's in over his head, it's different from acquiescing, as I've accused him of doing. I'm saying I think he is acquiescing and empowering the rioters. That's what I believe has happened here. This could end in 3 nights. It really could. Ask for support from all local law enforcement agencies that you have and start enforcing every law that you have in a community. People that are standing on the grass, blocking the traffic, screaming, that are creating too loud of a disturbance, round them all up, throw them in jail, and not have a judge show up to do any of the bailouts until Monday. And do the same thing again. And if somebody pulls out a shotgun, you got to be ready to respond to that. We do not allow regular people like me and Paul and the folks who live in Wauwatosa to engage in insurrection. If somebody is sought to have a shotgun in Wauwatosa, the cops are going to respond with the SWAT team and they'll negotiate for 6 hours to talk them out. If they show up in the context of a Black Lives Matter with a shotgun, however, then suddenly we all become little carnations with our petals falling off. It's not the way we handle anything else. The way I describe would work. The question is merely whether or not we have the guts to do it. In the same fashion that you can stand up to the Germantown School Board and say you shouldn't be out there firing swimming coaches because one of them criticized Black Lives Matter. All of these things require a certain will. And when that will does it, the old statement, where there's a will, there's a way, that's true. News Talk 1130 WISN, Mark Belling, late afternoon show. School boards all over the area are meeting this week. Franklin has a meeting tonight. Johnson Creek met on Monday night. They decided to back off their plans to open in school, and instead they're going to the virtual. It's, as I say, impossible to report on all of these other than each time it happens. You get the impression that in a lot of these communities, especially away from the city of Milwaukee, the parents have been under the impression they were going to open school because they said, hey, we're going to open school. But then when it comes time to do it, they go in reverse. And again, many of these schools are supposed to open this coming Monday, the 24th. So these parents are just shell-shocked by this because they don't have any provision to take care of the kids. They were expecting the kids to go back to school, and they were acting on the assumption that they go ahead and do it. Anyway, the story I want to compare and relate this to. You're now hearing the Big Ten saying, well, maybe we'll start the football season in January. It's the same thing. The Big Ten is canceling the football season for the fall. Well, we're going to try to do it in the spring. Maybe we'll start it in January. All that's happening with everybody here is they're kicking the can down the road. In the same way that in June, the school districts all said, okay, we'll reopen in August and September. The Big Ten, okay, football's supposed to start in September, we're going to shove it to January. When you get to the middle of December, they're going to be in the same pickle, and nobody's going to have the guts to start football. It's the same problem with the schools. There's always going to be some number or some case or some reason, or somebody crying or some lazy school teacher or somebody who's got some reason not to do it. Think how ridiculous we're talking here. So they're going to play football in the upper Midwest in January and February, when I would suspect the virus numbers are going to be worse than they are here in August, September, and October. The answer is they probably won't play in January or February. Then the next thing you know, they'll talk about playing in April, and nobody will be able to pull the trigger on that. Until we get out of this mode, of being afraid to start anything. There is another point that I want to make because I don't know how deeply I'm going to get into the whole school issue. For the longest time, those of us on the right were mocked because we wouldn't listen to the experts. They aren't listening to the experts. You weren't listening to the experts. Interestingly, that's all turned now on the school situation. With the exception of Kirsten Johnson up in Ozaukee, Washington. By the way, she sent me an email finally saying, well, we're not urging these schools to close. We're just giving them data and information and advice. This is the reason we shouldn't be having these health agencies in the first place. They seemed sanguine until now. No one knew that they would be running around telling people whether or not they should be opening schools. We thought health officers were like making sure that there were enough Band-Aids that were at the local, candy striper's desk or so on. We didn't know that they were going to be people that were going to run around and stick their beaks into people's noses. But as you see in Ozaukee and Washington, these are two counties where essentially everything has closed. Both of them canceled their county fairs. The southern parts of both communities, now Germantown and southern Washington counties, going to a hybrid. Southern Ozaukee County, Mequot isn't opening up. There's fears that some other districts are going to choke and punt on this as well. What they share in common, again, is they have a health officer who has a bias toward putting out information to lead people to not get on with their lives. Anyway, on this point of following the science, the CDC and Children's Hospital have both said schools should be reopened. Children's Hospital has said, look, there's much more fear of long-term damage to these kids by not socializing and not getting out and going to school. They're better off in school. That's what Children's has said. The CDC has said the same thing. So suddenly now when the experts are saying something that the lefties don't want to hear, they're the ones that aren't listening to the experts. Now, I'm not here telling you that if the CDC says jump, we should all jump. Or if Children's Hospital says this is what you ought to do, we ought to do it. I'm saying most of these eggheads don't know what they're talking about any of the time. But the liberals were telling us and telling us and telling us and telling us and telling us to follow the experts until the experts have been almost unanimous in saying there is essentially no risk to children at all in opening the schools, open the schools. Suddenly, the crowd that has been telling us to listen to the experts doesn't want to listen to the experts. Now, I know what's driving this and what's been driving it from the beginning. This has nothing to do with children. The schools just don't want to admit it. This has everything to do with a significant number of the teachers and administrators being lazy stiffs who don't want to work. I don't believe this calculation involves the danger to children at all because children are at extremely low risk and have been from the beginning on COVID. What has been driving this instead is the fact that in most school districts and most universities, the tail wags the dog, and the tail is the teaching staff, the faculty. And it is the school districts there that are unwilling to confront them and will screw the taxpayers, screw public health experts, and screw parents and children. All very similar to the situation we see in Wauwatosa appeasing the protesters to appease teachers who, after all this time, still refuse to work. I do want to poke into this whole area of moving beyond the decision of opening and so on to the way that all of us individually in our lives have had to confront with the reality of COVID. Some businesses are shut down. Restaurants are going under. A lot of retail stores are done. Travel industry's in a depression. The airlines are laying off people like crazy. In the meantime, other people have gone to work every single day. And then you have some people that have either in work at home mode or doing nothing for 6 months. It's been a different situation depending on your circumstance. I want to address that larger picture for a moment and talk about how in situations like this, you see many people rise to the occasion and sacrifice and some who don't. And if you're wondering why my generally low, and it's a generalization, there are many great public school teachers and almost all private school teachers are great. My generally low opinion of public school teachers is reinforced by this because once again, in a situation where all over the country, a lot of people have risen to the occasion and have made sacrifices, the only class of employee that we can think of that has responded by lowering to the occasion and once again showing that they care only about themselves and gravitate toward doing as little as possible while pocketing their paychecks is public school teachers. Again and again and again and again and again and again and again, they show that they're on the scrap heap of work ethic and the scrap heap of caring about their fellow man. Right? Dead bottom. And you want to disprove me? Get one of have a meeting and say, we're going to go back to work. In the same way everybody else that's been working has been going back to work. You can do that. You can easily do it. But why would you? As long as we keep A, nominating them for sainthood, and B, telling them and put together a 3-minute Zoom lesson and then go lay on your butt all day and collect a full paycheck because you're afraid that you're going to get a sniffle. Why would they not do it that way? In the same way that Wauwatosa created a monster by appeasing the protesters, we've created a monster by caving again and again and again and again and again to these crybabies. Have we not? There's a lot of Frank Nitti in a lot of these school teachers, if you know what I take that back. That's not fair to Frank. He's at least sort of walking to D.C. I still think he's hopping in the car at night. But, I'll give Frank this. He is actually out there yelling and screaming and doing all of that stuff. He's not doing the whole thing through Zoom the way some of these teachers are. I apologize to Frank Nitti. Does Frank know how to get there? He has quite the entourage. The question I've asked that nobody in the media will ask is who's paying Frank Nitti. I'll ask it again because Frank has never asked that question. I mean, there's a lot of people going on. They got food. I mean, he's not missing any meals out there. Who's paying for this? Well, we assume it might be George Soros. I asked the question. And is it all in cash? Is this reportable income? Because if it's not in cash, there might be some child support payments that somebody might start trying to collect on. 531 News Talk 1130 WISN. Standing up from Milwaukee, this is the Mark Billing Late Afternoon Show on News Talk 1130 WISN. How much of last night's Brewer game did you watch? Zilch. Oh, you missed a good one, actually. Well, it's a weird one. I actually, for as many baseball games, I got into this. I was watching most of the game. I held a meeting that was in a social setting, and then the game was good, so I stuck around, and I didn't stay till the 12th inning. I'm incapable of that anyway, but I watched the rest of it at home. All the baseball games I watched, I've not seen a lot of no-hitters live. I've seen a few, and there's enough that I don't remember them all. They're still rare, and the interesting thing about no-hitters is of pitchers who enter the ninth inning with a no-hitter, it's way less than half that get one. You would think it'd be about half because, about half the innings don't have a hit in them. But way fewer than half the pitchers who go into the ninth inning with a no-hitter actually end up getting a no-hitter. There's a funny story about this. Should I tell it or should I just move on? No, I got to tell it now. Well, anyway, Ken Ameda for the Twins had a no-hitter going into the ninth. And, I mean, he just had the Brewers stymied. I mean, they were flailing. I used to try to play fast-pitch softball, and this wasn't any good at it. The only time I just didn't have enough speed on the pitch. And in order to have an effective drop ball, you have to have some speed so that when it drops, the batter can't hit it. And I just wasn't good enough. But anyway, in fast-pitch softball, the most effective pitch that you can throw other than just the hard, blinding rise ball that you can't hit is a drop. And the drop is just that. And, you put a spin on the ball and it's coming in. And remember, in softball, the bat is really close to the mound. I forget what the number of feet is, but it's very short. It's way closer than Major League Baseball. You just have no time to react. And the ball's coming in a straight line, and then it just, gravity and the spin takes it down. And that's what Maeda's pitches were reminded me of. I mean, he's throwing this 87-mile-an-hour junk that the bottom was falling out, and the Brewers kept going rear end over teacup, chasing after this thing. And the ninth inning, the first, and like I said, I thought he had no-hitter stuff, and I thought I was finally going to see one, but I just think there's nothing worse, if you're a sports fan, than seeing your own team no-hit. To me, it's the ultimate in humiliation. I did not want it to happen. And this is the second time in a week a Cub pitcher, Yu Darvish, had a no-hitter against, weirdly, 2 Asian Americans. What's the deal on that? We can't hit Asian American pitchers. Yu Darvish for the Cubs, and his Kenny Maeda last night. But I don't know what that would be. Are there any others left? The Darvish is a power pitcher and Maeda just throws junk. So the Brewer leadoff hitter in the ninth inning is Sogard. If I was a pitcher, I would just hate Sogard. Sogard is he's an annoying hitter, which is kind of what makes him effective. He kind of, Maeda's throwing this junk, and The Brewer pitcher in the ninth inning, Perdomo, was out there forever and ever and ever. So Mate is sitting on the bench for 30 minutes. He finally comes out after this. He throws one of these junk pitches, and Sogard just kind of puts his bat somewhere near the ground. And the best I would describe it, it was sort of like how you hit when I did golf, I had no ability to hit out of a bunker. You know why I couldn't hit out of a bunker? I didn't own a sand wedge. I'm trying to use a 9-iron. I mean, that's all I had. I didn't have that. I had a 9-iron. So, I mean, you know how I got out of the bunker? Grab the ball and throw it. I said, screw that. Well, that's what Sogard did. He kind of put the bat down there low, and he just got this little flare beyond the reach of the second baseman. And the next thing you know, the Twins are committing error after error after error, and the game went in extra innings. And it's the end of that. As long as the Brewers have been playing the Twins, and remember, back in the American League, they were in the same division, so they played all the time. Now you get them occasionally in interleague. Historically, they've just played wild and great games, and that game last night would have been a great one to actually have had fans at, but we don't have that anymore. I want to move here in a little bit of a different direction. And first, though, I want to revisit and circle back to a topic that I was discussing earlier in the program. I was talking about the input from the Ozaukee, Washington County Health Department to some of these local school districts that had decided to not open their doors. Most districts in Washington County are opening. However, Germantown came out with a decision that I'm just getting reams of complaint. People don't know who to complain to, so they complain to me, and I get that. That's fine. But you need to complain to your school board members. And I know that a lot of people feel comfortable telling me because I agree with them, and they're not comfortable confronting some lefty who's selling them out. Germantown is the southernmost district in Washington County. You can't go any farther south in Washington County and still be in Washington County. Germantown's in the southeastern corner. It's where it is. Likewise, in Ozaukee County, the southernmost school district in Ozaukee is Mequon-Thiensville. So it's the two on the southern edge, and those two counties that have made the decision to not go to full-time opening of schools. I've been contacting Matthew Joint, who is the new superintendent of Mequon-Thiensville, and asking him about the decision that was made by the school board that has so angered parents. And I said, did you get input on this from the Ozaukee, Washington Health Department? And to Dr. Joint's credit, he honestly answered the question and said yes. He said that we have been getting input from both the Wisconsin Department of Health Services, that's Andrea Palm, and the Ozaukee, Washington Health Department, which is Kirsten Johnson. He said they both provided information, but then went on to say that it is his understanding that the Ozaukee, Washington Health Department supports their decision to not open the schools. I might be splitting hairs here, but I don't think I am. I do not believe that appointed bureaucrats should either be supporting or opposing policy decisions. This is the problem that we have in Washington, where the State Department thinks that it's the president. And they sandbag Trump, they sandbag Republicans. The same thing happens in the EPA. You have these bureaucrats that, when given a little bit of power, think that, well, I know better. I got a master's degree. I got a this, that, or the other thing. This is why we can't let these health ordinances pass in places like Sheboygan County. Whatever authority is granted will be abused. I want to analogize my point, go to a break, and then expand this the following way. I've mentioned that, like, all the if you do any kind of reading on this, like, all the cardiologists in America are pushing the no carb thing now. It started with the guy from Milwaukee who wrote Wheat Belly, and it's just a big thing. Cardiologists are big on the no carb, and there's significant reason for it. But their belief is that if you lower the amount of carbs, there's what's the term is called keto, or just low carbs, or limit your carbs, that lots of things will improve, that your blood sugar numbers will improve significantly for people that are pre-diabetic or diabetic, which is a health crisis now in the United States. Our diabetes numbers are through the roof because we're all too fat. That you'll lower that by going to low carb, you'll lose weight, it's better for your heart, it's better for this, that, and the other thing. Here's the thing, though. What do cardiologists worry about? I'm asking you. The heart. I know this is an obvious question, but it's such a key point to me. The cardiologists don't seem to mind if you go eat a 14-ounce steak and then, put butter on top of it. Another thing, if you eat the sour cream, don't get the light. Get the full sour cream. That seems perverse, right? Do you know who's uncomfortable with that advice in the medical community? This is a key point. The oncologists, the cancer doctors. There's a fair amount of evidence that a lot of that gloppy stuff can be cancer causing. Now, here's my point with regard to these health officers and talking to school districts and so on. Well, of course, the cardiologist is going to focus on what's good for the heart. What's the oncologist going to focus on? Preventing the cancer. Go to a baseball team. Better example, go to a football team. The defensive coordinator has different priorities than the offensive coordinator. The head coach has to take input from both. Of course, a health director is going to err on the side of locking people up for the next 90 years so that none of us ever has a germ waft by. You can't let people who are only focused on a part of the equation make your decisions. So don't ask them. You can get numbers from them. Do not get recommendations from bureaucrats whose expertise is only in the one area, because everything we have in life is balancing numerous things. It's the problem we've made with our country with our overreaction to COVID in gutting the economy, killing so many businesses, and creating all of these additional health problems, people not going in for cancer, suicides going up, depression, etc., because we only focused on the one part, the COVID. When you have appointed bureaucrats who are in charge of one area, do not let them ever make a final decision on anything. It is the elected officials who have to balance all factors. And in the case of the schools, the factor of whatever the health issue is with the mental health of the children not being in school, the convenience of the parents needing to have their kids in school, the need to have these children progress in the competitive world that we're in, so they have to have a proper in-person learning experience. Of course, somebody who's involved in public health is going to say one thing, just as somebody who is seriously concerned about any of the number of other things might have a different input. Elected officials by their nature, and individuals, all of us by our nature, have to process all pieces of information. We have given excessive power to these health commissioners. They have abused it. They have made bad decisions from the chief quack Fauci on down. But the real problem is us in giving excessive weight to their input. If Ravi Shankar had his way, by the way, he's mentioned on this show twice in the same show, all the Beatles songs would have had the sitar in it. What was the Beatles song that they had the Ravi Shankar sitar? Really famous one. Late 60s. I can hear it now. They did that thing. They got into that whole thing with him, and George Harrison took Ravi Shankar under his wing. There is that, but that'll come to me. My point on this is that anybody who has a folk Norwegian Wood, yeah. I think there was another one in there too, but Norwegian Wood had that great little sitar sound in it. Tomorrow Never, yeah, they had all that. So right, it was up to Ravi Shankar. Hey Jude would have had a sitar in there, and you wouldn't have Paul McCartney playing the bass. Will you be quiet? No, he's giving me every song that has the sitar. Are they all Ravi Shankar sitar, or are they just sitar? Sitar, but sometimes the Beatles, Ravi Shankar actually played it on one of them. It might have been Norwegian Wood, it might have been something else. I don't care. If you have input on that, Paul welcomes this type of... It won't take long, but I'm going to tie these points together that I've been making here about what actually happens, not for school teachers who get to shove everybody around and whatever they say goes, the kinds of balancing decisions that regular old Americans have had to make for the last 6 months as a result of COVID, where some people are facing economic ruin, some people are sitting on their butts getting rich with all the extra unemployment checks they're getting. Some people's businesses have exploded, real estate agents. Other people are doomed chefs. Some people, they come into work every day just as they always have because they're deemed essential. Others are trying to learn how to do their entire job at home in a bedroom, working at home. This is what real life during all of this has been, something that was thrown at us essentially by a governmental overreaction. But now let's put ourselves for once. I always tell you to put yourself in the other guy's shoes. In this next brief segment, I'm going to put you in your own shoes. Oh, everybody thinks that the Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds was the dividing line in there, and to this day, people question whether or not that stood for LSD, and I actually think the Beatles might have been so stoned they don't remember if it stood for that because it didn't seem to mean anything else. All right, let's get to this. I have, as you know, gotten lots and lots and lots and lots of feedback, and much of it very emotional from parents who are crushed, devastated, angry, furious that in their communities they're either not going to open the schools, or I'm getting a real group of complaints about this hybrid thing for people say that that's just the worst thing of all. You know, go to school on Monday and Wednesday if you're from A through M, and Tuesday and Thursday if you're L through Z, and then rotate the Fridays so that it's one on the other, that this just creates chaos, and it's even worse rhythm for the kid, that they'd almost be better off with total virtual rather than have the kid, the song we're just doing, in one day and then out the other. I cherry picked out 2 or 3 to share with you. Not necessarily because of the points that they make for or against the schools, but because I thought they were interesting insights into the way a decision like this would greet a 34, 37, whatever they are, parent of an 8 to 10-year-old kid. So just a few of them. The first is to Germantown. Germantown has made the decision to go to an extremely impossible to explain hybrid plan. Some of the kids are in full-time. Some are part-time by the alphabetical. Then the high school, I think they take a can of alphabet soup, shake it up in the urine. If you an E lands on your nose, you go to school on Thursday, but not to anyway. Mark, I wanted to make you aware that the Germantown School District is on bad decision number 2 for the 2021 school year. Attached is the letter I received within the last hour notifying families of the move to 2 days a week of in-school instruction for middle school students, as well as modification to every other day class for the high school schedule. I am contacting the board members to voice my outrage and was hoping you would spread the word to other district families to build momentum so our children can receive the essential service for the basic education we pay so dearly for. The thought of our children getting a subpar education because of cowardice of the school board and teachers union makes my blood boil. I am an essential worker, proud to be putting in extra hours and serving a high-risk population. Feel free to use my name if you choose to do so. I rarely get that. 99% don't use my name, and of course, I never use names. And even when they want their names used, and I tend not to do it. This woman wants her name out there. She's so mad. And did you see what she said? First of all, she's an essential worker. I don't know what her job is, but she said she serves a high-risk population. She's out there doing her thing, and it infuriates her that her kids are being shortchanged on their education. Her name is Christina Brockhouse. And again, I share it only because she's literally almost begging me. So impassioned she feels. Now from another community, and this is one that I'll mention it's from a woman, but she does not want her name shared. She's referring to the decision that she received yesterday at 2:49 from Mequon Thiensville, indicating that they are going to renege on their earlier plans to start in school and instead are going to start with virtual. I couldn't believe they were stating zip codes to potentially be hotspot worry zones. People found out about this all day via Nextdoor and Facebook. But no official statement was sent until 2:49 p.m. yesterday afternoon. So there was quite a frenzy all day. Now, her point was the school board met on Monday night. Yet, people were finding out about this through these social media apps, Nextdoor is a neighborhood kind of thing, Facebook, that there was not actually any communication from the school district at all. So in the meantime, imagine the word flying around the community. She continues. We are now in a scramble to get our daughter enrolled for in-person learning. Think about this. She's pulling her kids out of Mequon-Thiensville. She's got 5 days. Most schools, well, I shouldn't say most, many start next week, the 24th. This woman is pointing out, we're scrambling. We are trying to find a district to put our kid in. We're not going to take this. We are now in a scramble to get our daughter enrolled for in-person learning. Grafton was full for the grade that we need. The closest public school is in Cedarburg, so we're currently looking into a private school. I don't wish any ill will on anyone, but I hope other parents are seeking alternative learning to cause a ripple effect through the public schools in our district. Now, I thought that was quite interesting. I made this comment earlier in the program. One wonders how many parents, it might only be a few, decide, screw this. I'm pulling my kids out. I'm going to go somewhere where there's a teaching staff that cares enough about my kids that they're going to open up the schools. We already have declining enrollment, and we have open enrollment in the state of Wisconsin, and we have a growing number of private schools. There's competitions for these kids. Can you think of a worse thing to do during this time than to work up the saliva in your mouth and shoot a big fat wad of gob in the face of these parents? Too graphic for you? Paul's fine with that graphic analogy. Now this one. This one was sent to the Oak Creek School District and Board. Your last-minute decision to start schools virtually and then extort parents is absolutely appalling. In Oak Creek, they're saying for $100 a week, you can send their kids to school and we'll run a daycare for them. You are in the position to do what is in the best interest of the students of our community, not the teachers. And again, this is the key. These school districts think that it is their role to suck up to the teachers. That it'd be as stupid as our radio station thinking that we exist for the purpose of me making money and me not putting on a radio talk show. Furthermore, your apathy for the taxpayers of your community is outrageous, as you completely ignored our voice during the survey earlier this year. The results were clear that parents want their kids in school to learn, be social, and build the skills they need to become better than the previous generation. More importantly, to be able to grow up, thrive, make good decisions and intelligent choices, the skills your organization during COVID-19 seems to lack. In the past week, both the CDC and Children's Hospital of Wisconsin have come out publicly stating it is safe and essential for students to return to school. Children's went further to underline the importance of school in children's lives and how the lack thereof is a detriment to their mental health. This week's reversal to appease only the teachers is borderline mental child abuse. To use the school as glorified daycares, and for a fee no less, is nearly criminal. How can you justify saying it is not safe for students to return to school at the same time, but then in the same breath say, well, if you pay us, the students can come back to learn while the teachers will still be at home teaching remotely? As a lifelong member of this community, again, I'm asking you to put yourself in the shoes of the person who writes this. As a lifelong member of this community, former student, property owner, taxpayer, and family man who brought my wife into Oak Creek and started a family here, you have for the first time in my life made me ashamed to say I reside in Oak Creek. I won't read his name. He signs it. Now this one. I'm not going to read this woman's name, but it is so filled with details that identify her. She seems to be okay with it, but I'm going to take out a few things so as to not do so. Suffice to say that she has a job for which she's probably going to be laid off because she's in an industry that is tanking right now. But in the meantime, she's an essential employee who has been going to work doing a very difficult job every single day and is a parent who's now been turned around and screwed by her school district. She writes, Mark, I'm a parent of 2 children. 7 and 5 in the Mequon-Thiensville School District. I am also an essential worker, and then names her job, and have been, and then mentions what her job is, since this all started. My husband would be considered an essential worker. He was, and then she mentions the job he had. But fortunately, he changed his position in February and is able to work from home now. He did the homeschooling in the spring the best that he could while with me working and me being gone on trips. Her job takes her away. that wasn't school. Needless to say, we needed the schools to open in the fall and filled out the survey and wrote comments imploring the district to open. We aren't unique in needing the schools to open, as several families on our street are in the same situation. My husband watched the first school board meeting in July when they said the results of the survey, when they showed the results of the survey and that they were formulating a reopening plan. It was a worthless meeting. However, my husband had a gut feeling from the way that they were talking that the schools weren't going to open. So we enrolled them at a private school locally. We specifically moved to Mequon for the schools and are now paying taxes for the schools and paying for private school tuition. I should mention I've been with, and then she mentions her company, just under 2 years, and I received a letter in July and most likely will be furloughed in October. It is beyond infuriating to be paying taxes, paying for private school, being an essential worker, and most likely losing my job while teachers claim to be a martyr and too scared to go to work. Well, some of us have been doing this all along. I've been to, and then mentions the places her job is taken to. The list goes on and on and on, and I am just fine. It is ridiculous that they aren't opening and are complaining. If they are scared and don't want to work, quit. Make room for the good teachers who have integrity and actually care about the kids. They can sit at home with no paycheck. I have been working, want to continue to work, but will be one of the few essential workers who won't have any income at the end of this month, at the end of this most likely. 3 of our school board members' terms end in April of 2021. Since I may not have a job, it seems like a great time for me to run and replace those hacks. After the announcement this week, 3 other families on our street have now enrolled at the same private school, and their first day is today. Now, she signs it. I don't want to identify her by name, and I took out a fair number of details. Another one, they found a private school. And again, furious. Through this whole period, many people, Paul and I don't think we're martyrs coming into work. Admittedly, there aren't a lot of people in our building. But I have a talk show, so I'm on the radio. He's a producer. I don't want him to try to do this dial somewhere at a remote and so on. We're here. We're not martyrs. It's part of our job. People work in landscaping. It's part of the job. The people that are the highway work. It's part of the job. The people that are, do plumbing. It's part of the job. Zillions of people out there doing it. Cops, the firefighters, ambulance, EMS, they're doing the job. That's part of the drill. Okay, you got a sickness going around. We still work. That's just part of what our thing is. Other people, okay, the company doesn't feel safe having you come into work as an accountant. They're taking all their computer crap and try to do it all from home, communicating via email, trying to set up these online networks, going through active verification every 3 hours. Well, they're doing it. It's part of the deal. They're doing it. Whether or not we ought to be doing or overreacting doesn't matter. You still have your job to do. Other people, they work in the restaurant business, they're going under. They work in retail, they're going under. They work in commercial management. They clean office buildings. They have no office buildings to clean. They're going under. They're hoping that they can get this government check, that government check. Otherwise, they're going down to the food pantry. That's the thing that they've got going on. You talk about the traveling thing that's going on. The travel industry absolutely decimated. The people who work in that killed. The people who own hotels are, foreclosures in the hotel business like crazy. Every kind of different experiences. Some people working even harder now than they've ever had to work. Others facing ruin. Some people in a business that's suddenly taken off and thrive. This is the reality of what happens when you throw this big, fat, giant curveball into society. And whether we did the right thing or not is not my point. My point is that across the board, from what I just mentioned, from people that are either laid off, their shot, or you're working real estate and you're making a fortune, or everywhere in between, you're somebody in radio that's working at home doing sales, or you're me and Paul, whatever it is. I am telling you, I struggled to find one damn group of employee anywhere who has complained about this other than the teachers. Everybody else has accepted the reality of their thing except these big mouth crybabies empowered by school board members who'd rather listen once again to their bleep and screw everybody else. God bless the private school teachers who are all reporting to work. They're all operating their things. God bless the parents who are pulling their kids out of the public schools and sending their kids to go to learn from teachers who actually want to teach, rather than these stiffs who are sitting up their cottages up north saying, oh yeah, I'll make a sacrifice. I'll do 7 minutes a day on Zoom. 620 News. Oh, the word. As rants go, that was pretty good, wasn't it? I'm just right about this. I mean, there's a here and there somebody I've not heard a postal employee complain. I've not heard FedEx complain. These people that suddenly are doing DoorDash, running to every sick person's door, grabbing every COVID-infested doorbell, taking change and credit card. None of them are complaining. Do you know anybody? You see anybody else complaining? Even in sports, Lorenzo Cain didn't complain. He just said, "I won't take the money. I'll go home. I'll go home." Teacher, you don't want to go. Quick, give the money back. Go home. They're all getting paid. They're all getting paid, the teachers. We haven't even laid off some of them and said, okay, since we're all doing Zoom, let's just have one second grader do the Zoom for everybody. They're all still getting paid. The point that I make is, as a country, we have shown tremendous patience with this whole damn thing. And just about everybody, whether you're doing extra work, less work, at home, in person, change it up, find a different, other than the occasional here and there, some individual. As a group, who's complained other than the teachers? Who said they're not going to do it other than the teachers? The university professors. I should throw that in. That's teachers too. Same one. Other than that, everybody else is doing this just fine and is keeping their mouths shut. Once, have you heard that doctors complain, the nurses aren't complaining? The people how about the people standing at the clinics doing those temperature checks all day? Can you imagine a more miserable, rotten job than that? How'd you like to be an Uber driver? Your income is gone. You don't have one at all. And if you finally are still getting one, here comes some COVID guy blowing all over your car. You get no complaints. We've done spectacularly well as a society in dealing with this mess. One group of crybaby bitchers. One. And if you would have predicted going in, Paul, there's only going to be one group in our society that's going to whine and complain and not handle this, wouldn't we all have known it would have been the public school teachers? Lost a lot of respect. People say, was it your mother? I really think my mother would have gone in and taught. I really do. I just think the teachers that existed back in that day, part of it was, I remember when I was a kid, I was the one that didn't want to go. I was fake and sick. She was the one that was trying to drag my sorry, whiny, complaining butt out of bed. Of course, that's what it's come to. The kids have been out of school for... if I was a kid, you think back there, oh, this would be great, never having to go to school? These kids are going nuts. Nuts. So now in Germantown, if it's Tuesday in leap year and it's a quarter moon and the big hand hits 10 and the little hand hits 8, you can come to school for 4.5 minutes unless you were born April the 17th when we were still under the sign of Aries. I mean, I would read the Germantown plan, but it actually is, it's more confusing than what I just said. Family. Oh, family. Family is the word. Family. Family. Again, I want to stress, I'm tired of having to explain this because I always make clear I'm only talking about people I'm talking about. The public school teachers who want to work and those that are in districts that are returning, I am not talking about you. And I'm not talking about any of the private school teachers. I'm obviously only referring to those who don't want to work and who have complained to their school board members. If you live in a community and you're a teacher who wants to work but you're shut down, I'm not critical. And I don't feel like I should have to explain that. But, if I could talk about a bad doctor, I'm not criticizing the good doctors. If I talk about a bad talk show host, I'm certainly not criticizing myself. I'm talking about the mayor of Oak Creek. 1130 WISN, Mark Belling, late afternoon show. Yeah, I think it's not only is the first show that Ravi Shankar got mentioned twice in the same show, and it might be the only show he's ever been mentioned on. The reason he mentions it, Paul and I were laughing. Neither of us can name anybody else who plays the sitar. I mean, other people played it, like George Harrison played it, but nobody, when you think of that instrument, he's the only person you think of, right? I don't know that there's any other instrument where he's like the only, almost any instrument you could think of like maybe two or three people that do it. Anyway, I said to Paul, and he didn't believe me, but you can look up now anything. And that's again where no discussions are fun because you just look it up on Google. Said, I swear Ravi Shankar played Woodstock. And the reason I remember that is the difference between, say, Woodstock and Live Aid, which occurred 15 years later in 1984, was Live Aid was on live TV and live radio and everybody heard it in real time. There was no live broadcast of Woodstock. people went to Woodstock and then they came back and told these stories and we thought they were making them all up. It wasn't until they did a movie and there was a record. The record came out a couple of years later. And when I say record, it was, vinyl. It was, flip the record over and all of that. And that had some of the performances and then there was the movie. But that was like a 3-year delay. So there was a delayed reaction in terms of who did what. And then, it was 3 days, all night and so on. They only put a tiny fraction of the performances that were on there. But I think with Woodstock, it was the most weird, eclectic lineup that you could imagine. But there's Ravi Shankar out there, Crosby, Stills, and Nash, the Who were there, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Melanie, Brand New Key. I mean, just, you could imagine. And people have debated forever what the greatest performance at Woodstock was. Well, I didn't see it all, and I only saw the ones that are on the movie or on the record and so on. And it's hard to answer that, but I do know Santana was, I'm just saying, I do know which performance, once the record came out and the movie came out, and this is, as I said, 18 months to 2 years later, riveted people of my generation and created the most buzz and talk. And it was by far Jimi Hendrix. Now, he closed it off. He was the last guy that was up there. I mean, he played, there's no, but I'm just saying, who cares that nobody left? This is when we heard the thing later. And Jimi Hendrix was dead by the time the record came out. Because I think the record's like 2 years after. He did Purple Haze on there, but he did that. To this day, people argue about whether or not it was disrespectful or it was virtuoso, his version of the Star Spangled Banner. And I happen to think that you can do the Star Spangled Banner any way you want as long as you're showing respect. You can do it country, you can do it jazz, you can do it soul, you can do it traditional, you can do it operatic like Robert Merrill used to do it at the Yankee games, or you can do it on an electric guitar hitting chords that people didn't know existed. As long as you're not mocking and making fun of the music, you're giving it homage, the same as any other piece of music. And I thought Jimi Hendrix's version of the Star Spangled Banner was incredible. But the thing about it that I remember is, remember, this is 1969, and I'm probably hearing it in 71. I just had never heard someone make a guitar sound like that, which is why he's still considered by many, one of the greatest guitarists of all time. I mean, just hearing 3 notes, other than we know it's his version, that sound he made on the guitar, nobody else sounded like him. Really, I'd say to this day, wouldn't you say? Paul said he was left-handed, and he thinks that affected how he hit because he would play the chords with the right hand then, right? Obviously, I told there aren't many left-handed guitars. In fact, a lot of left-handers just play a right-handed guitar, right? Paul McCartney plays left-handed, and Hendrix played, you said, left-handed, yeah. So anyway, Woodstock, if you go back and check the set lists that were out there, and I mean, some of these, Joan Baez was playing at 4 o'clock in the morning, and like the first 4 bands, somehow Sweetwater got in there. Mountain was in there. I mean, it's just this Country Joe and the Fish, and then the famous Fish chant. You know what the Fish chant was? I'll give you the first letter of it. Give me an F. Well, I'm not going to give you the second letter. All right, 635 News Talk 1130.